Olivia, a 73-year-old widow, faces a painful recovery after a fall, relying on her children, Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca, for support. But overhearing them call her a financial drain shatters her trust, revealing their view of her as a burden rather than a mother. Unbeknownst to them, Olivia holds a $12.4 million trust fund meant for her grandchildren. Devastated yet resolute, she decides to redirect this legacy, reclaiming her independence. As she purchases a Victorian townhouse and forges new friendships, a brewing family conflict looms. What will Olivia do with her fortune, and how will her children react? If Olivia's story of resilience and rediscovery moved you, please support our channel. Subscribe and like and share to help us share more inspiring tales. Your support means the world and keeps these stories alive. Click now to join our community and catch our next unforgettable narrative. The weight in my chest grew heavier each night I returned home past 10, my body aching from more than just the injuries that had upended my life. Jonathan, my son-in-law, was rarely around, always on the road 4 days a week, leaving a void in the house that mirrored the one in my heart. When I murmured that I didn't want to be a burden, my voice barely above a whisper, Alexandra's response was swift but laced with a subtle strain. "It's not a burden, Mom," she said, her eyes betraying a flicker of impatience despite her words. "Family takes care of family, but we need to figure out the logistics." Her practicality cut through the air, sharp and clinical, as we sat in the sterile hospital room. The beeping monitors a cruel reminder of my fragility. After much discussion, my children devised a plan. I'd rotate between their homes during my recovery. 2 weeks with Alexandra, then 2 with Michael, and finally 2 with Rebecca once she returned from her conference. They'd coordinate driving me to physical therapy 3 times a week, a schedule that felt like a puzzle they were reluctantly piecing together. "We'll make it work," Alexandra declared, her tone resolute as she gathered her designer handbag and keys, her polished exterior a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt. That's what family does. But as they left my hospital room, I caught Michael's low mutter in the hallway. "This is going to be a nightmare for our schedules," he grumbled to Alexandra. "Lisa already says we barely have time together with my work hours." Alexandra's reply was measured but firm. "It's temporary, but we need to talk to her about long-term plans after this. She can't expect us to upend everything every time there's a crisis." I squeezed my eyes shut, feigning sleep as tears carved silent paths down my cheeks. In that moment, the loneliness I'd felt since Gerald's death returned with a vengeance, sharper and more suffocating than ever. The next 6 weeks were a blur of humiliation and isolation. At Alexandra's sprawling colonial home, I was tucked away in a guest room at the far end of the house, a space so pristine it felt like a museum exhibit, beautiful but devoid of warmth. The housekeeper, Maria, checked on me twice daily, delivering meals and assisting with small tasks, her kindness a lifeline in the sterile silence. Alexandra was a ghost in her own home, her presence fleeting, her smile polite but distant. Jonathan, when he was around, offered courteous nods and perfunctory questions about my comfort, but our interactions never deepened. My grandchildren, Sophia and Mason, were caught in their whirlwind of teenage life: soccer practices, study groups, and social events. Mason would occasionally poke his head in, offering a quick, "Hey, Grandma," before dashing off. Sophia sometimes lingered for a few minutes, her eyes glued to her phone, half listening as I asked about school, her responses clipped and distracted. I felt like an intruder in their carefully curated lives. The most piercing moment came during one of Alexandra's dinner parties. Laughter and clinking glasses echoed through the house, but I wasn't invited to join. When I shuffled to the kitchen for a glass of water, my arm in a sling and my steps cautious, Alexandra intercepted me in the hallway. "Do you need something, Mom?" she asked, her smile tight, her eyes darting back toward her guests. "I can have Maria bring it to your room." The message was clear. My presence, frail and unsteady, didn't belong in her world of polished sophistication. I retreated, my heart sinking, feeling more like a ghost than a guest. Michael's home was a different kind of chaos. With 3 children under 12, the house was a whirlwind of noise and activity. Lisa, his wife, didn't bother masking her frustration at my presence. Her sighs were heavy when I needed help reaching a shelf. Her comments pointed about their already overstretched schedule. One evening, I overheard her whispering sharply to Michael in the kitchen. "I'm already drowning with the kids in my part-time job," she hissed. "I didn't sign up to be a nurse, too." Michael's voice was strained. "She's my mother, Lisa. What am I supposed to do? Spend less time at the office," she shot back, "or hire someone to help during the day?" "With what money?" Michael retorted. "The business is barely recovering. We're scraping by as it is." I lay on the living room sofa, pretending to sleep, each word a fresh wound. These were the same children who had never hesitated to ask Gerald and me for help. College tuition, down payments, medical bills. We'd given everything, joyfully, without keeping score. Now, my temporary need felt like an unforgivable imposition. By the time I reached Rebecca's home, I was determined to reclaim my independence. I pushed through the pain in physical therapy, practiced my exercises diligently, and began researching affordable home health services for when I could return to my apartment. Rebecca's household was a touch warmer. Her 12-year-old twins were delighted to have me, eagerly showing off their school projects and chatter about their activities. Rebecca herself was the most attentive of my children, though I could see the exhaustion in her eyes as she juggled her demanding sales job, her family, and now my care. She tried to hide it, but the strain was there, a quiet undercurrent in her gentle smiles. It was during my final week at Rebecca's that I overheard the conversation that shattered something deep within me. I'd woken early and was slowly making my way down the hallway when I heard my name. Alexandra's voice was firm. "Mom's recovery is taking longer than we expected. We need to think about permanent arrangements." Rebecca's tone was cautious. "What, like a nursing home?" "She'd hate that." "Not necessarily," Alexandra replied. "Maybe assisted living, somewhere with trained staff." Michael chimed in, his voice heavy. "Those places are expensive. Her pension and Social Security won't cover it." "She must have savings," Alexandra insisted. "Dad was always careful with money." Daniel, Rebecca's husband, interjected. "Those facilities start at what, $5,000 a month? Whatever she has won't last long." Alexandra's voice hardened. "We can't keep doing this indefinitely. We have careers, kids, responsibilities. Mom needs to understand that." Rebecca's voice tightened. "So what? We abandon her?" "Not abandon," Alexandra snapped, "but we need to be realistic. Rotating her between us isn't sustainable. She's becoming a financial drain. Time we could be working, childcare costs for her appointments, the emotional toll." "A financial drain?" Rebecca echoed, her voice thick with disbelief. "After everything Mom and Dad did for us." Alexandra sighed. "That was different. They were our parents. It was their job to raise us. Now she's our responsibility. But there are limits." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand pressed against the wall, the words "financial drain" echoing like a death knell. I thought of the sacrifices Gerald and I had made, the vacation cabins sold for Alexandra's tuition, the retirement savings given to Michael's struggling business, the second mortgage for Rebecca's twins' medical care. I thought of the trust fund, $12.4 million quietly growing for their children, a legacy meant to secure their futures. But in that moment, hearing my children weigh my worth against their mortgages and schedules, something inside me broke. For 42 years, I'd poured my heart into them, sacrificing dreams, health, and time. Now I was a burden, a disruption to their carefully balanced lives. In that hallway, a decision crystallized. The trust fund, my final gift, would never reach their hands. Sometimes the truest lessons in gratitude come when something precious slips away, unnoticed until it's gone forever. My children would learn that lesson, not through my love, but through its absence. Olivia Richardson, now 73, sat alone in her modest apartment, the dim glow of a single candle casting flickering shadows across the room. It was her 68th birthday when this chapter of her life began, marked not by celebration, but by quiet solitude. A store-bought cupcake sat on her small kitchen table, its single candle a faint beacon in the emptiness that had settled into her world since Gerald, her husband of 45 years, had passed. Pancreatic cancer had stolen him 3 years earlier, leaving behind a void that no amount of routine could fill. Together, they had built a life from humble beginnings, not one of ostentatious wealth, but one of steady comfort, enough to support their three children, Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca, whenever life demanded it. Their sacrifices had been many, but Olivia and Gerald had given them willingly, driven by a belief that parents exist to pave smoother paths for their children. Alexandra, now 47, had followed her father's path into corporate law, her sharp mind and relentless ambition carrying her to heights Olivia could scarcely have imagined in her own youth. Michael, 44, had carved out a respectable niche with his construction company, its moderate success a testament to his grit and their financial support during his early failures. Rebecca, the youngest at 40, thrived in pharmaceutical sales, her charm and drive propelling her into a world of polished professionalism. All three were married, their homes sprawling and pristine, nestled in neighborhoods that gleamed with privilege, neighborhoods built, in part, on the sacrifices Olivia and Gerald had made. The vacation cabin they'd sold to fund Alexandra's Ivy League tuition, the $80,000 pulled from their retirement savings to resurrect Michael's business, the second mortgage taken to cover medical bills for Rebecca's twin girls. These were the bricks of their children's success. Olivia and Gerald had never begrudged these choices. To them, it was the unspoken duty of parenthood, to give everything so their children could dream bigger, live better. But there was something their children didn't know, something Gerald had guarded with quiet pride. While working as a mid-level corporate attorney, he had nurtured a talent for cautious, deliberate investments. Small gains over time, he'd often said, his voice warm with a conviction. That's how ordinary people build extraordinary legacies. By the time his cancer diagnosis came, their careful planning had amassed nearly $2 million in investments, properties, and insurance policies. In his final year, bedridden but resolute, Gerald worked with their estate attorney to create a generation-skipping trust fund, projected to grow to $4 million by the time it reached their grandchildren. This trust, designed to bypass their children and provide for their grandchildren at age 25, was Gerald's vision of a lasting gift, a safety net for a future he and Olivia wouldn't live to see. "Our children are set," he'd whispered from his hospital bed, his hand frail but firm in hers. "They've had our help. But our grandchildren, they'll face a world we can't predict. This is how we'll care for them when we're gone." They chose not to tell Alexandra, Michael, or Rebecca about the trust. Gerald feared it might breed complacency or shift their focus from building their own lives. "Let this be our silent gift," he'd said, his eyes bright with love and purpose. "Our final act." Olivia had agreed, trusting his wisdom, as she always had. After his death, she left their family home, unable to bear its echoes of Gerald's laughter or the weight of its upkeep as arthritis crept into her joints. She settled into a modest two-bedroom apartment, its simplicity a balm to her grieving heart. Her children had helped with the move, their efficiency both a comfort and a quiet wound. They sorted furniture with clinical precision, keeping what might suit their own homes, storing pieces they might claim later, discarding anything too worn or sentimental. Olivia watched, silent, as they appraised her life's possessions, not for their memories, but for their utility. "Mom, you should think about a retirement community," Alexandra had said, unpacking dishes in the small kitchen. Her tone was practical, tinged with the authority of someone accustomed to solving problems. "They have activities, medical staff, everything you'd need. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance." Olivia had placed Gerald's favorite coffee mug on the shelf, its chipped rim a reminder of mornings spent together. "I'm not ready for that," she'd replied, her voice steady but soft. "I want my independence." Alexandra's sigh, sharp and familiar, carried the weight of exasperation. "Just promise you'll consider it. Your savings won't last forever, especially if you need care later." Olivia nodded, saying nothing. She didn't tell Alexandra about the steady income from Gerald's investments, which supplemented her teacher's pension. Her modest life, the small apartment, the morning walks in the nearby park, the simple meals, was a choice, not a necessity. She cherished the quiet rhythm of it, volunteering at the library, splashing through water aerobics with other seniors, sharing lunches with old colleagues. It was enough. Her children called when they needed her. Advice for a family matter, a recipe for a dinner party, a plumber's name, or most often, her time as a babysitter. Olivia never refused. Her grandchildren were her joy, their laughter a tether to life itself. She cheered at their soccer games, clapped at dance recitals, glued together science projects, and listened to their whispered secrets about first crushes and playground dramas. In those moments, she felt Olivia needed, her heart full in a way it hadn't been since Gerald's death. But then came the fall that shattered her carefully rebuilt world. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in October, the sidewalk outside her apartment slick with wet leaves. As Olivia stepped out for her daily walk, her foot slipped and she fell hard, pain searing through her left hip and shoulder. A neighbor's quick call brought an ambulance, and the hospital delivered a mixed verdict. No hip fracture, but a severely damaged rotator cuff requiring surgery and months of physical therapy. Cooking, cleaning, even dressing herself would be nearly impossible during recovery. From her hospital bed, Olivia called Alexandra, who arrived with the brisk efficiency of a lawyer, consulting doctors and reviewing discharge papers. Michael came later, his construction site dust still clinging to his jacket, a small bouquet of carnations in hand. Rebecca, away at a conference, promised help upon her return. As discharge loomed, Alexandra took charge. "We need a care plan," she said, her voice firm. "You can't manage alone." "I could hire a home health aide," Olivia offered, "just for a while." Alexandra's eyebrows shot up. "Those are expensive, Mom. Does your insurance cover that?" Olivia hesitated. "I have some savings." Michael, glancing up from his phone, chimed in. "Those aides cost like $25 an hour. That's over $4,000 a month for full-time help. A rehab facility might be better. Insurance would cover part of it." Olivia shook her head, her heart sinking. "I want to stay in my home." Her children exchanged a glance, a silent conversation that excluded her, as if she were a problem to be solved rather than their mother. "Well," Alexandra said after a pause, "you could stay with one of us for a while." Neither offered their home immediately. Michael cleared his throat. "Our guest room's under renovation. Another month at least." Alexandra nodded. "And I'm swamped with a big case at the firm." In that moment, Olivia felt the weight of her lifetime of giving shift from noble to foolish. The pride she'd felt in her children's success turned bitter, their words reducing her worth to dollars and inconvenience. She slipped back to her room unnoticed, her mind racing with a clarity she hadn't felt since Gerald's death. By morning, she had made her decision. The trust fund, Gerald's silent gift, would remain just that, silent. Her children, who measured her value in costs and burdens, would not know of it. It was for her grandchildren, for their dreams, for a future she and Gerald had envisioned together. And in that choice, Olivia found a quiet strength, a final act of love that no one could take from her. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of my whispered confession to Gerald's memory pressed against my chest like a stone. The quiet of Rebecca's guest room seemed to amplify the ache in my heart. "I think we made a mistake, my love," I murmured to the empty air, picturing Gerald's warm, steady eyes. "We gave them everything, every opportunity, every comfort, but we forgot to teach them what it means to give without expecting something in return." The realization stung, not just for them, but for me. Had I failed as a mother by shielding them too much, by smoothing every path? My mind churned with regret and resolve, a restless tide that carried me toward a decision I hadn't known I was capable of making. The next morning, I woke with a clarity that felt like a stranger in my own body. For years, I'd moved through life as a mother first, always yielding, always accommodating, my own needs tucked neatly into the background to ensure my children's comfort. But something had shifted, something fierce and unapologetic. I felt the stirrings of self-preservation, a quiet rebellion against the role I'd played for so long. I rose from bed with purpose, choosing a light blue blouse Gerald had always said brought out the spark in my eyes. I left behind the shapeless loungewear I'd worn through my recovery, opting instead for small acts of defiance. A swipe of coral lipstick, my silver hair swept into a neat chignon, and my mother's pearl earrings clipped on with care. These weren't just adornments, they were armor, reminders that I was still Olivia Richardson, a woman with her own mind, not just a mother to be managed or a problem to be solved. When I stepped into Rebecca's kitchen, the air felt charged with routine. Alexandra sat at the island, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keys as she sipped coffee. She glanced up, her eyes widening slightly at my appearance, a flicker of surprise breaking through her usual composure. "You're looking better, Mom," she said, her tone polite but distracted. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well," I replied, my voice steady, almost unfamiliar in its firmness. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warmth of the mug grounding me. "I've made a decision. I'll be returning to my apartment tomorrow." Alexandra's fingers froze mid-keystroke, her head snapping up. "Tomorrow? That's way too soon. Your physical therapist said you need at least 2 more weeks of assistance." "I've already called a home health service," I said calmly, stirring cream into my coffee. "They'll provide the support I need." Her brow furrowed, a mix of concern and frustration crossing her face. "Mom, those services are ridiculously expensive. We talked about this." I met her gaze, a thin smile tugging at my lips. "You talked, I listened, and now I've decided." My tone carried a quiet edge, one I hadn't used with her before. It wasn't anger, but something sharper. Resolve. Alexandra studied me, her lawyer's instincts kicking in, searching my face for cracks in my determination. "Is something wrong?" she asked cautiously. I took a sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle her. "I heard your conversation last night," I said simply, "about me being a financial drain." Her expression faltered, a flash of embarrassment warring with defensiveness. "You misunderstood. We were just discussing practical realities." "I understood perfectly," I countered, my voice even but unyielding. "And it helped clarify some things for me." At that moment, Rebecca swept into the kitchen, still in her robe, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Mom, you're up and dressed. You look lovely." Her warmth was genuine, but I caught the quick glance she exchanged with Alexandra, a silent question passing between them. "Thank you, dear," I said, softening slightly. "I was just telling Alexandra I'll be returning to my apartment tomorrow. I've arranged for home care services." Rebecca's smile wavered. "Are you sure that's wise? We don't mind you staying longer." I tilted my head, my tone mild but pointed. "Some of us have concerns about the expense, and I value my independence." The kitchen fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Alexandra's cheeks flushed, and she reopened her laptop, though her fingers hovered without typing. Rebecca busied herself with making toast. Her movements quick and nervous. I pressed on, undeterred. "I'd like to speak with all of you this evening. You, Michael, and your spouses. There are some financial matters we should discuss." Alexandra's head snapped up, her eyes sharp with sudden interest. "Financial matters? What kind of financial matters?" "My long-term care plans," I said, pausing for effect. "Among other things." Rebecca nodded quickly. "Of course. I'll call Michael. We can have dinner here tonight, all of us." "Perfect," I replied, taking my coffee to the patio where the morning sun warmed the air. As I settled into a chair, I felt a quiet triumph. For the first time in years, I was steering the course of my own life. Throughout the day, the household hummed with a subtle shift in energy. Rebecca went out of her way to make my favorite lunch, chicken salad with grapes and walnuts, checking on me repeatedly with a mix of care and unease. Alexandra made 3 hushed phone calls in the garden, her voice carrying fragments of financial matters, and "we don't know anything for certain," to where I sat reading. I pretended not to notice, but each word sharpened my resolve. By evening, the dining room was a tableau of strained anticipation. Michael arrived first, his quick peck on my cheek, accompanied by a cautious, "You feeling all right, Mom?" His concern felt genuine, but I knew it was tinged with curiosity now that financial matters were on the table. Alexandra and Jonathan arrived together, still in their crisp business attire, apologizing for traffic with practiced ease. Daniel, Rebecca's husband, opened a bottle of wine, pouring glasses for everyone but me, mindful of my medication. Rebecca had outdone herself with a meal of roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, and spring vegetables, the aromas filling the room. Yet, despite the warmth of the setting, tension coiled beneath the surface, a fog that stifled easy conversation. The meal passed with superficial chatter, updates on the children's activities, remarks about the unseasonably warm weather, Alexandra and Jonathan's upcoming charity event. But the undercurrent was unmistakable. Every glance, every pause, felt weighted with expectation. Finally, as Rebecca served coffee and a store-bought cheesecake, Alexandra cleared her throat, her lawyer's precision cutting through the haze. "So, Mom, you mentioned wanting to discuss some financial matters." All eyes turned to me, and a wave of sadness washed over me. When had my children begun to see me as a ledger rather than a mother? When had our bond been reduced to calculations of inheritance? I set down my coffee cup, meeting their gazes with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. "Yes," I said, "I've been thinking about my living arrangements and long-term care plans." "We're all concerned about that too," Michael interjected, his tone slipping into the smooth cadence he used with clients, polished and persuasive. "I'm sure you are," I replied, my voice calm but pointed, "particularly about the financial implications." A faint flush crept up Michael's neck. "We're concerned about your well-being, Mom. The financial aspect is just one part of that." "Of course," I agreed, my smile tight. "Well, I want to set your minds at ease. I won't be asking any of you to contribute to my care costs. I have resources you may not be aware of." Alexandra leaned forward, her curiosity barely veiled. "What kind of resources?" I paused, picturing Gerald's cautious approach to our finances, his quiet pride in securing our future. "Your father made some sound investments over the years," I said. "I have sufficient funds to cover home health care for the foreseeable future." Michael's surprise was evident. "Dad left additional investments?" "I'm saying I've reconsidered what legacy truly means," I replied, my voice steady. "And I'm exercising my right to direct my assets according to my values." Alexandra's frustration surfaced, her tone sharp. "Mom, you're being cryptic. If you're making major changes to your estate plans, we deserve to know the details." "Whitey," I asked, my question cutting through the room like a blade, "why do you deserve to know the details of how I choose to distribute my personal assets?" Michael leaned forward, his voice firm, as if stating the obvious. "Because we're your children." "Yes, you are," I said, my heart aching with love and disappointment. "And I love you deeply. But being my children doesn't entitle you to my resources, nor does it give you the right to information about my financial decisions." Rebecca's voice trembled as she spoke. "We're not saying we're entitled to anything, but family communication is important." "I agree," I said. Yeah, I might be, I agree," I said, my tone softening but resolute, "which is why I'm communicating now that my estate plans have changed in response to recent events and revelations. The specific details will become clear in due time." Alexandra's legal instincts kicked in, her voice measured but probing. "Mom, if someone is influencing your decisions, this new attorney or investment advisor, we need to be concerned. Elder financial abuse is unfortunately common." I laughed softly, not out of bitterness but genuine amusement. The idea that my choices could only be the result of manipulation was almost absurd. "I'm not being manipulated, Alexandra," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I'm finally seeing clearly. For decades, I believed parental love meant giving everything without expectation. I poured my heart into building your lives, sacrificing my own needs to ensure your comfort. But I see now that was a disservice, to you and to me. It created a dynamic where my needs became inconvenient, interruptions to the lives my sacrifices helped create." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "That's not true, Mom. We care about you." "I believe you do," I said gently, my heart softening at her distress. "But caring and prioritizing are different things. When my dependence became clear, I became a problem to solve, not a person to cherish." Daniel, who had been silent, shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tightening around his wine glass. The room felt heavy with unspoken truths, and I let them settle, knowing this moment was a turning point, not just for me, but for all of us. In the midst of a dinner heavy with unspoken tensions, I broke my customary silence. "Olivia, there's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions within me. "No one here sees you as a burden." My words hung in the air, fragile yet resolute, as I looked across the table at my children, Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca, each grappling with their own response to the conversation they didn't realize I'd overheard. I drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of unspoken truths pressing against my chest. "Thank you, Daniel," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "But I heard everything quite clearly. What matters now is that we're all on the same page. I'm returning to my apartment tomorrow. I've arranged for professional home care to support me. The Vermont property is being sold, and I've restructured my estate to reflect my current values and priorities." The words spilled out, each one a deliberate step toward reclaiming my autonomy, a declaration of my resolve to live on my terms after years of prioritizing others. A profound silence enveloped the table, thick and almost tangible, as if the air itself had paused to absorb the gravity of my announcement. My children's faces betrayed their inner turmoil. Alexandra's sharp, analytical gaze narrowed, her mind already dissecting my words for hidden motives, her suspicion a familiar shield against vulnerability. Michael's expression darkened with disappointment, his jaw tightening as he processed the loss of something he'd likely already calculated into his future plans. Rebecca, my youngest, looked as though her world had cracked open. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her emotional distress raw and unfiltered. Each of them was wrestling with the implications of my decision, and I could almost hear the gears turning in their minds. Different tempos, different motives, but all rooted in the same shock. Alexandra broke the silence, her voice measured, but laced with an edge of challenge. "Is there anything else you want to tell us, Mom?" Her question wasn't just curiosity, it was a demand for clarity, a need to regain control of a narrative she hadn't anticipated. I softened my tone, letting warmth seep into my words despite the ache in my heart. "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze before turning to include Michael and Rebecca. "Despite everything, every misunderstanding, every moment of distance, I love you all deeply. That hasn't changed and never will. What's changing is how I choose to express that love and what I expect in return. I'm done being an afterthought in my own life." The words felt like a release, a shedding of the weight I'd carried for decades, always putting their needs before my own, always hoping they'd see the love behind my sacrifices without me having to spell it out. The rest of the evening unfolded like a strained performance, each of us playing our parts with varying degrees of conviction. Jonathan and Daniel, my son-in-law and close friend, tried to steer the conversation toward lighter topics, weather, local news, anything to break the tension. But their efforts fell flat, like stones dropped into a still pond. My children cycled through emotions as if caught in a turbulent current. Alexandra's contrition was fleeting, quickly replaced by a calculating reassessment of what my decisions meant for her. Michael's confusion gave way to a quiet frustration, his mind likely racing to salvage whatever financial or strategic advantage he had assumed was his. Rebecca's distress lingered, her eyes darting to me with a mix of guilt and desperation, as if she could will the moment to rewind. I observed it all with an odd detachment, as though I were an audience member watching a play I'd seen before, already knowing its bittersweet ending. My heart ached for the family I dreamed we could be, but my resolve was unshaken. When it was time to retire to the guest room, my children surprised me with hugs that carried an unfamiliar intensity. Rebecca held on longest, her arms trembling as she whispered, "I'm sorry if we hurt you, Mom. We never meant to." Her voice cracked, and I felt her tears against my shoulder, a silent plea for forgiveness. "I know, sweetheart," I murmured, patting her back gently, my own eyes stinging. But sometimes the deepest wounds come from carelessness, not intent. Her apology was genuine, but it couldn't erase the clarity I'd gained from overhearing their earlier conversation. The one where they discussed my frailty, my needs, as if I were a problem to be managed rather than a mother to be cherished. Alone in the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the quiet amplifying the weight of my decisions. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marianne Thornfield, my estate attorney. Despite the late hour, she answered promptly, her voice warm but professional. "Everything is prepared as we discussed," she assured me. "The trust amendment documents are ready for your signature tomorrow at 2 p.m. The Charitable Foundation paperwork is complete as well. Once you sign, the changes will be legally binding." "Thank you, Marianne," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "I'll be there." She hesitated, her tone softening with concern. "Are you still comfortable with the extent of these changes? They're a significant shift from your previous estate plan." "I'm certain," I replied without a trace of doubt. Recent events have only reinforced that this is the right path. The conversation I'd overheard had been a painful but necessary wake-up call, illuminating the gap between the family I'd hoped to nurture and the one sitting around that dinner table. After hanging up, I moved to the small desk in the guest room, its surface bare except for a single lamp casting a soft glow. I took out 3 sheets of paper and began writing letters, one for each of my children. The words flowed easily, each sentence a distillation of the love and lessons I'd carried for them all my life. I explained that my revised estate plan wasn't a rejection of them, but a reflection of the values Gerald, their father, and I had always held dear: compassion, generosity, and the belief that true wealth lies in how we treat one another, especially when it demands sacrifice. I reminded them of the joy Gerald and I had found in helping others, how we'd chosen to live modestly so we could give more to those in need, a choice that had brought us more fulfillment than any material possession ever could. In each letter, I poured out my hopes for their futures, not as an admonishment, but as a quiet plea. I believe you have the capacity to understand why I've made these choices, I wrote, my pen trembling slightly. Maybe not now, but someday. My deepest wish is that this decision guides you back to the values your father and I tried to instill. Supporting each other, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard, when it costs you something. I sealed the envelopes, tucking them into my purse. These letters would remain unread until after my death, attached to the estate documents that would reveal the full scope of the legacy Gerald and I had built, and my decision to redirect it toward causes that embodied our shared vision. The next morning, Michael arrived at Rebecca's house in his oversized SUV, insisting on driving me back to my apartment. I sensed his need for a private conversation, perhaps a chance to sway me or to gauge the extent of my plans. The drive began in silence, the hum of the engine filling the space between us. Michael's occasional remarks about traffic or the changing cityscape felt like placeholders, attempts to delay the real conversation. Halfway to my apartment, he finally spoke up, his voice careful but tinged with urgency. Mom, I hope you know we all want what's best for you. If we've seemed distracted or unsupportive during your recovery, it's only because we're juggling so many responsibilities ourselves. I understand, Michael, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Life is complicated for everyone. My words were an olive branch, but I wasn't retreating from my stance. He seized the opening, relief flickering across his face. Exactly. And about the Vermont property, I hope you'll consider letting me look at development options before you finalize the sale. It could be a win-win for everyone. The sale is proceeding, I said firmly, cutting off his pitch. I've made my decision. His knuckles tightened on the steering wheel, a subtle sign of his frustration. Don't you think decisions like this should involve family discussion? He pressed, his voice sharpening. That land has emotional significance for all of us. Does it? I countered, my gaze steady. When was the last time you visited the property, Michael? The question hung between us, unanswerable. The Vermont house had been a haven for Gerald and me, a place of memories and meaning. But for Michael, it was merely an asset, a future possibility to be leveraged. He frowned, deflecting. That's not the point. It's the potential it represents. Exactly, I said, my voice calm but resolute. It represents potential and possibility for me in the present, not some hypothetical family gathering that's been someday for 30 years. My words landed like a quiet rebuke, and Michael sighed, his shoulders slumping. I feel like something's changed, he said, his tone heavy. You're different since the fall. Not different, I corrected gently, just clearer. Sometimes it takes a shock, like a fall or an overheard conversation, to bring things into focus. And what exactly have you brought into focus, he asked, an edge creeping into his voice. The difference between what I hoped our family was and what it actually is, I replied, my calm masking the ache in my chest. It's been educational. Michael pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, turning off the engine and facing me with a look that shifted from frustration to calculation. Mom, I need to ask you something directly, he said, his eyes searching mine. How significant are these financial resources you mentioned? Are we talking about retirement savings or something more substantial? I studied his face, so like Gerald's in its strong jaw and deep-set eyes, but missing the warmth that had always defined my husband. In that moment, I saw the full measure of our failure as parents, not in loving our children, but in assuming love alone would teach them the values we cherished. We'd given them everything, but we'd never demanded they give back, never shown them that sacrifice is the currency of true connection. Michael, I said softly, the fact that this is your primary concern tells me everything I need to know about the wisdom of my decision. His face flushed, a mix of embarrassment and defensiveness. That's not fair. I'm just trying to understand the full picture. The full picture is this, I said, my voice unwavering. I have enough for my needs. I'm restructuring my estate to align with my values. And for the first time in decades, I'm prioritizing my own well-being. I reached for the door handle, signaling the end of the conversation. Now, would you please help me with my suitcase? I have an appointment this afternoon I need to prepare for. Michael helped me settle into my apartment with a care I hadn't seen from him in years. He arranged my medications on the kitchen counter, checked that the path to the bathroom was clear, even offered to stock my fridge with groceries, an offer I politely declined, noting that I'd arranged for delivery. As he prepared to leave, he pulled me into an awkward hug. We all love you, Mom. I hope you know that. I do, I assured him, my heart softening despite everything. And I love you all deeply. That will never change. But as I spoke, I felt the weight of the truth. Love alone wasn't enough to bridge the gap between us. After he left, I stood in the center of my modest apartment, the familiar walls and furniture wrapping around me like a long-lost embrace. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe freely, move at my own pace, make decisions without justifying them to anyone. The relief was profound, a quiet victory after months of feeling like a guest in my own life. I spent the next hour preparing for my appointment with Marianne Thornfield, gathering documents and reviewing the trust amendments one final time. The changes were monumental, a complete reorientation of the legacy Gerald and I had built, but I felt no hesitation, only certainty. At 1:30 p.m., a car service arrived to take me to Marianne's office. As we drove through the city, I gazed out at the spring flowers blooming in parks and along median strips, their vibrant colors a reminder of renewal. There was a poetic symmetry in this season of growth mirroring my own transformation. I thought about the trust fund Gerald and I had built over decades, a secret we'd kept even from our children. Not out of distrust, but because we wanted them to forge their own paths. By tomorrow, that fund would be irrevocably redirected, its resources channeled toward the causes we'd always believed in: education, community support, opportunities for those who needed them most. It wasn't a rejection of my children, but a fulfillment of the values Gerald and I had lived by, a legacy that would outlast us both. As the car pulled up to Marianne's office, I felt a quiet resolve settle over me, the kind that comes from knowing you have chosen the right path, no matter how difficult the journey. The $124 million once destined to secure a comfortable future for my grandchildren was now poised to serve a radically different purpose. For the first time since overhearing my children's hushed conversation about me being a financial burden, a quiet peace settled over me, like a soft blanket on a cold morning. Gerald, my late husband, had always viewed money as a tool, neither inherently good nor evil, but potent in its application. His words echoed in my mind as I resolved to wield this tool to craft a legacy that mirrored our shared values, not merely our lineage. The sting of my children's words still lingered, but it was transforming into something else, a clarity that fueled my determination to redefine what our family's wealth would mean. As the car glided toward the sleek, modern building, housing Marianne Thornfield's law firm, I found myself silently thanking Gerald for his foresight. His financial wisdom had been a lighthouse through decades of uncertainty. Always be ready for unexpected storms, he'd say, his voice steady and warm. He couldn't have predicted this particular tempest, the realization that my own children saw me as a drain, but his careful planning had given me the shelter I needed to face it. Stepping out of the car, I felt a surge of purpose, as if I were shedding an old skin. The pain of betrayal had sparked an awakening, one that was leading me toward a future my children couldn't yet fathom. There was grief, yes, but also a burgeoning sense of freedom, like a bird taking flight after a long confinement. Marianne's office was a study in understated elegance. The walls were adorned with tasteful artwork, abstract pieces in muted blues and golds that spoke of sophistication without ostentation. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the city skyline, the buildings glinting like jewels under the late morning sun. Bookshelves lined with leather-bound legal tomes exuded authority and permanence. As her assistant ushered me into the spacious conference room, I noticed a polished mahogany table at its center, graced with a vase of fresh lilies and a crystal carafe of water with lemon slices floating lazily on the surface. The air smelled faintly of citrus and wax polish, a subtle reminder of the care taken in every detail. "Mrs. Richardson," Marianne greeted me, rising from her chair with a warmth that felt genuine yet professional. She was a striking woman in her late 50s, her dark hair streaked with silver and pulled back into a sleek chignon. Her intelligent eyes, sharp and perceptive, seemed to see straight through to the heart of things. "I'm so glad you're feeling well enough to come in person. Are you comfortable? Can I get you anything?" Her voice was smooth, laced with a compassion that put me at ease. "I'm quite comfortable, thank you," I replied, settling into the ergonomic chair she gestured toward. Its soft leather cushioned my still tender shoulder, a lingering reminder of my recent fall. "And I appreciate you arranging everything on such short notice." My voice was steady, but inside my heart thrummed with the weight of what I was about to do. Marianne nodded, her expression a blend of professionalism and empathy. "When clients are as certain as you are about their wishes, I make it a priority to act swiftly." She placed a sleek leather portfolio on the table between us, its contents holding the blueprint for my new path. "I have all the documents prepared as we discussed. The amendments to the Generation Skipping Trust, the establishment of the Richardson-Larson Charitable Foundation, and the updated will reflecting these changes." "Excellent," I said, a surprising calm washing over me despite the enormity of the moment. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a seismic shift in the trajectory of my family's legacy. Yet I felt anchored, as if Gerald's steady hand were guiding me still. Marianne leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Before we proceed with signatures, I want to confirm once more that you fully understand the implications of these changes. Redirecting the trust assets from your biological descendants to the Charitable Foundation is irrevocable. Once executed, these funds cannot be returned to your family line." "I understand completely," I assured her, my voice firm. The decision had crystallized in my mind over sleepless nights, each one spent wrestling with the pain of my children's words and the vision of what I could create instead. "And you've considered the potential relational impact this may have when your children eventually discover these decisions?" She pressed gently, her tone careful but probing. I smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "That's precisely why I'm doing this, Marianne. The relational damage has already been done. This isn't about vengeance. It's about restoring perspective, about showing them what truly matters." My voice wavered slightly, betraying the ache in my heart, but I pressed on. "I want to leave behind something that honors the values Gerald and I built our lives around, not just the wealth we accumulated." She nodded, her expression softening, as if she could sense the depth of my resolve. "In that case, let's proceed." For the next hour, I signed document after document, each stroke of the pen a deliberate step toward my new purpose. The room was quiet save for the soft rustle of paper and the occasional murmur from Marianne as she explained a clause or confirmed a detail. With each signature, a complex tapestry of emotions wove itself within me. Grief for the fractured relationships with my children, determination to forge meaning from that loss, and an unexpected lightness, as if I were unburdening myself of a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. By the time I signed to the final page, establishing the Richardson-Larson Charitable Foundation as the primary beneficiary of the $124 million trust, I felt transformed. It was as though I had shed a heavy cloak, one woven from years of expectations and unspoken obligations. The foundation would dedicate itself to supporting elderly individuals without family resources, offering them dignity, care, and community in their final years. I could almost see Gerald's approving nod, his warm smile affirming that this was the right path. The thought of those who might otherwise face loneliness and vulnerability finding solace through our legacy filled me with a quiet pride. "Congratulations, Olivia," Marianne said as her notary applied the final seal to the documents. The Richardson-Larson Foundation is now officially established. The board members you selected have all confirmed their willingness to serve. They'll convene their first meeting next month to begin establishing protocols for selecting grant recipients. I smiled, my heart swelling at the sound of Gerald's middle name intertwined with mine, a permanent testament to our shared vision. Thank you, Marianne. Gerald would have approved of this, I'm certain. She slid a slim envelope across the table. The final matter is this letter, to be included with your will and opened only after your passing. You mentioned wanting to explain your decisions to your children. Yes, I said, retrieving 3 sealed letters from my purse, each carefully penned the night before. My hands trembled slightly as I placed them beside the envelope, each one addressed to one of my children, Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca. These are for each of them individually. Please ensure they're delivered with the estate documents when the time comes. Marianne accepted them with a solemn nod, her eyes reflecting an understanding of the weight they carried. Of course. Now, how would you like to proceed with the Vermont property sale? My real estate contact is ready to move forward whenever you give the word. Immediately, I replied without hesitation, the decision as clear as the morning sky outside. I'd like to use a portion of those funds for my next endeavor. Her curiosity flickered, though her professionalism held firm. Which is? Creating a home that truly reflects who I am now, I said, my voice steady with conviction. Not who I was expected to be. The words felt like a declaration, a reclaiming of my identity after years of living for others. 2 days later, a for sale sign appeared on the Vermont property, its familiar rolling hills and sprawling estate no longer a tether to my past. By the end of the week, we had 3 offers, all exceeding the asking price. The final sale closed at $892,000, a sum that surpassed even the optimistic estimates. The transaction was seamless. The proceeds deposited directly into my new personal account at Meridian Trust Bank. It was a clean break, a financial and emotional unmooring that felt both daunting and exhilarating. Back in my apartment, I adjusted to life with the help of Elaine, a kind-hearted home health aide whose presence brought warmth to my days. She came for 4 hours each day, assisting with physical therapy exercises for my injured shoulder, preparing meals with a quiet efficiency, and handling tasks I couldn't yet manage. Contrary to my children's grim predictions about the cost of my care, the expenses were well within my means, thanks to Gerald's meticulous planning. Their words had stung, but they were wrong about so much. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a shift in my children's behavior. Alexandra began suggesting lunch meetings to discuss estate planning options, her tone overly solicitous. Michael repeatedly brought up construction companies specializing in aging-in-place renovations for the Vermont property, even after I told him it had been sold. Rebecca's invitations to Sunday dinners grew more frequent, each one laced with a warmth that felt rehearsed. Once, their attentiveness might have touched me, a sign of their care. Now I saw it for what it was, a calculated interest in their potential inheritance. Not in Mahon, the realization was a quiet ache, but I refused to let it define me. I kept our interactions cordial, neither encouraging their motives nor confronting them outright. It was a delicate balance, one that preserved the surface of our relationships while I forged a new path beneath it. 6 weeks after my fall, my shoulder had healed enough for most daily tasks, though certain movements still sent a twinge of discomfort. Elaine's visits tapered to 3 days a week, focused mainly on physical therapy and the occasional errand. I began taking short walks in the neighborhood park, each step a small victory in rebuilding my strength. The park, Park with its winding paths and ancient oaks, became a sanctuary, a place to reflect on the changes unfolding within me. It was during one of these walks that I met Eleanor Whitford, a widow I'd known casually from my volunteer work at the library. She was in her 70s, her elegant composure and serene confidence a testament to a life well lived. "Olivia," she called, waving from a park bench, her smile as warm as the autumn sunlight filtering through the leaves. "I heard about your fall. How wonderful to see you up and about again." I joined her on the bench, grateful for the chance to rest. "Thank you, Eleanor. It's been a challenging recovery, but I'm making progress." My voice was lighter than I expected, as if the weight of the past weeks had begun to lift. "You look well," she observed, her keen eyes studying me. There's something different about you, a certain lightness, despite the physical setback. Her perceptiveness caught me off guard, and I smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through me. Life has a way of clarifying what truly matters, doesn't it? Sometimes it takes a fall, literal or otherwise, to help us see more clearly. Indeed, Eleanor agreed, her gaze softening with understanding. After Harold passed, I felt something similar. Suddenly, all the social obligations and expectations that had seemed so important just weren't. Her words hung in the air, a shared truth between us, two women who had found clarity in the wake of loss. As we sat there, the park alive with the rustle of leaves and the distant laughter of children, I felt a quiet kinship with Eleanor. My journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt unburdened, ready to build a life that was truly mine. The $124 million, once a symbol of familial duty, was now a tool for something greater, a legacy of compassion, dignity, and purpose. And in that moment, I knew Gerald would have been proud. The spring air carried the joyful shrieks of children swinging at the nearby playground, their carefree laughter mingling with the gentle rustle of budding trees. I sat on a park bench beside Eleanor, the warmth of the sun soothing my skin as we shared a quiet moment, the kind that felt both familiar and rare. Her presence was a balm, her calm demeanor inviting a sense of ease I hadn't felt in years. Word around town is, you've become quite the force in real estate, Eleanor said, her lips curving into a knowing smile, her eyes glinting with curiosity. Marianne Thornfield and I sit on the Arts Council together, and she's been singing your praises, says you're making some daring moves. I tilted my head, a playful skepticism in my gaze. Sounds like client confidentiality is more of a suggestion these days. Eleanor's soft laugh danced between us, light and unapologetic. Oh, don't worry, she said, waving a hand dismissively. Marianne didn't spill any secrets, just hinted that you're stepping into a bold new phase of life. Us widows, we notice when someone breaks free from the mold society tries to pour us into. Her words landed with a quiet weight, resonating deep within me. There was something about her candor, her refusal to tiptoe around the truth, that sparked a warmth in my chest. I am shaking things up, I admitted, my voice steadier than I expected. Big changes. Good, Eleanor said, her tone firm, almost defiant. Too many of us get stuck playing the part of the family matriarch, frozen in time while everyone else moves forward. It's inspiring to see someone rewriting their story. Her approval felt like a gust of wind pushing me forward, and by the time our conversation wound down, she'd extended an invitation that caught me off guard. You should join our monthly luncheon group, she said, her smile turning mischievous. We're 6 widows, ages 65 to 82, calling ourselves the Liberation Ladies. We talk about everything, politics, romance novels, investments, you name it. Some of us chose this freedom. Others had it thrust upon us, but we're all determined to live these years on our own terms. I accepted without a second thought, surprising myself with how eagerly I craved this new connection, one unburdened by the weight of family expectations. As I walked back to my apartment that afternoon, my steps felt lighter, my heart buoyant in a way it hadn't been since before Gerald's illness began its relentless march. That lunch with the Liberation Ladies became a turning point, a beacon in a life that had felt dim for too long. Unlike family gatherings where I often sensed judgment lurking behind every glance, these women embraced me as I was. They listened to my story with empathy, not critique, offering insights without trying to steer my choices. Their openness was a gift. Their own stories of defying family pressures shared with a raw honesty that felt like a lifeline. Josephine, a former university dean with a sharp wit that could cut through any pretense, spoke of redistributing her substantial wealth to fund scholarships for single mothers returning to school. Her decision came after her adult son mismanaged the money she'd given for her grandchildren's future, a betrayal that stung but didn't break her. I wasn't going to let guilt dictate my legacy, she said, her eyes gleaming with defiance. Margot, once a renowned concert pianist, shared how she'd sold her sprawling historic home to move into a sleek, modern apartment. Her daughters had tried to nudge her into an assisted living facility they'd picked without her input, assuming they knew what was best. I wasn't ready to be shelved, Margot said, her voice steady but laced with the pain of their underestimation. Deborah, the group's eldest at 82, was the most audacious of all. With a twinkle in her eyes, she recounted how she'd shocked her conservative family by embarking on a world cruise with Edgar, a charming man 20 years her junior. "You should have seen their faces when we announced our plans," she said, chuckling at the memory. "You'd think I'd suggested holding up a bank instead of sailing the Mediterranean with someone who makes me laugh." I leaned in, captivated. "Did they try to stop you?" I asked. Deborah's grin widened. "Oh, they pulled out all the stops. Health concerns, warnings about cruise ship viruses, even hints that Edgar might be after my money. My son went so far as to arrange a casual lunch with their family attorney to talk about protecting my assets." The table burst into laughter, the kind that comes from shared understanding. "So, what did you do?" I pressed, hanging on her every word. Deborah's smile turned wicked. "I thanked them for their concern, then calmly informed them I'd updated my will. Anyone who challenges my decisions on grounds of competency gets cut out entirely." The room erupted again, and I found myself laughing harder than I had in years, the sound bubbling up from a place I thought had gone quiet. "Did it work?" I asked. "Like a charm," she replied, her voice triumphant. Suddenly, my judgment was impeccable. Eleanor raised her glass, her voice ringing with conviction. "To creating consequences that clarify priorities." We echoed her toast, our glasses clinking in a chorus of solidarity. To consequences. These women became my anchor, my confidants, my tribe. Through their stories, I unearthed parts of myself I'd buried long ago, opinions I'd silenced, passions I'd set aside, dreams I'd sacrificed to meet others' expectations. With their encouragement and Marianne Thornfield's expert guidance, I set out to find a new home, one that would reflect the woman I was becoming, not the mother or widow I'd been. "I don't want another apartment," I told Leanne Porter, the real estate agent Eleanor recommended, a vibrant woman in her 40s who specialized in historic properties. "I want a home with character, with history, with soul, something that needs restoration, just like me." Leanne's eyes lit up with understanding. "I know exactly what you're looking for," she said, her enthusiasm infectious. But change, I learned, doesn't come without resistance. At a family dinner, the air grew thick with tension when I revealed my plans. Alexandra, my daughter-in-law with a lawyer's knack for probing, raised an eyebrow. "What about the will?" she asked, her tone measured but sharp. "The will covered the family home and personal belongings," I explained, keeping my voice even. "Other assets were already jointly held or transferred before Gerald's passing." Her eyes narrowed, calculating. "How substantial are these investments, exactly?" she pressed. "Substantial enough," I replied, deliberately vague. Then I dropped the bombshell. "I've also decided to sell the lakefront property in Vermont." The table fell silent, the clink of silverware replaced by stunned gasps. The Vermont land, a modest parcel Gerald and I bought in our 30s, had been a vague dream of a family vacation home, never realized but often romanticized. Its value had soared as the area became a sought-after getaway. "You're selling the Vermont land?" Rebecca, my daughter, asked, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I thought that was for the family." I met her gaze, steady but gentle. It was never officially family inheritance. "Gerald and I talked about selling it several times. The market's right now." Michael, my son, leaned forward, his contractor's mind already spinning. "We always talked about building there, a place for the cousins to gather in the summers." "Plans change," I said simply. "The sale will secure my future needs." Jonathan, Alexandra's husband, cleared his throat, his tone cautious. "If I may, what's the property worth now?" I paused, watching their faces. "The realtor estimates between $780,000 and $850,000. Alexandra's eyes widened. "That's more than I expected," she admitted. "The area's developed," I explained. "Waterfront property is always valuable." Michael jumped in, his voice eager. "Before you sell, I could look at development options. We could build a small home, maybe even an accessory apartment for you." I saw his angle immediately, a way to keep the land in the family while appearing to prioritize my needs. "That's thoughtful, Michael," I said, my tone kind but firm. But I've already signed the listing agreement. It goes on the market next week. His face fell, and an uneasy silence settled over the table. Rebecca toyed with her napkin. Daniel stared into his wine glass, and Jonathan whispered something to Alexandra, who gave a subtle shake of her head. I pressed on undeterred. "There's something else," I said, my voice steady. "I've been meeting with a new estate attorney to update my will and estate plans, especially given my health challenges." Alexandra sat up straighter, her attorney's instincts kicking in. "A new attorney? Why not Hampton and Reed? They handle Dad's affairs. I know several partners there." I held her gaze. I wanted a fresh perspective, someone who specializes in elder law and estate planning for widows. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Who did you choose? I hope you vetted them thoroughly." I smiled, unruffled. "I did, and I'm confident in my decision." The air crackled with unspoken questions, but for the first time I felt no need to justify myself. I was rewriting my story, and it was mine alone to write. The conversation unfolded in the softly lit dining room, where the air carried a faint tension like the hum of a distant storm. I sat at the head of the table, my hands folded calmly, though my heart thrummed with a quiet defiance. Alexandra, my eldest, leaned forward, her lawyerly composure masking a flicker of concern. "Mom, you really should let me review those documents thoroughly," she said, her voice measured but insistent. "There are so many predatory firms out there targeting seniors." Her words stung, not for their intent, but for the assumption woven into them, that I, at 72, was somehow too frail of mind to navigate my own affairs. I pressed my lips together, suppressing a smile that threatened to betray my amusement. She had no idea how long I'd been steering my own course, and I wasn't about to let her patronizing tone unravel my resolve. "Marianne Thornfield at Wayland Legal is handling everything," and I replied, my tone even but firm. "She came highly recommended by my investment advisor." Alexandra's perfectly arched eyebrows lifted, a subtle crack in her polished facade. "Investment advisor?" she echoed, her voice tinged with surprise. "Mom, you've never mentioned having one before." I met her gaze, my eyes steady. "There are many things I haven't mentioned, Alexandra," I said, letting the words linger. "As you and your siblings have grown increasingly concerned about me becoming a financial burden, I thought it might reassure you to know I've been managing my affairs quite actively." The room grew quieter, the clink of silverware pausing as my words settled over the table like a fine dust. Michael, my middle child, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face flushing with a mix of guilt and embarrassment. "Mom, about that conversation," he began, his voice trailing off as he searched for the right words. I raised a hand, cutting him off gently but decisively. "I'm not interested in apologies, Michael," I said, my tone cool, but not unkindness. "Not when they're spurred by the revelation that I have more resources than you all assumed. That would only deepen my disappointment I've been grappling with." My words landed heavily, and I saw Rebecca, my youngest, blink rapidly, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Mom, that's not fair," she said, her voice breaking. "We've all been trying to help with your recovery." Her sincerity tugged at me, and for a moment I felt the weight of her efforts. The late-night calls, the hospital runs, the casseroles left at my door. "Yes, you have helped," I acknowledged, softening my tone slightly, "and I'm grateful for that, truly." But my gratitude was tempered by a deeper hurt. One I'd been carrying since my fall last winter had left me bedridden for weeks. "What troubles me is the attitude behind your help," I continued. "The sense that caring for your mother is an unreasonable burden rather than an expression of family love." My voice wavered, betraying the ache I tried to keep hidden. Michael shook his head, insisting, "That's not how we feel." But his eyes slid away from mine, unable to hold the weight of my gaze. "Isn't it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Alexandra, you described me as a financial drain. After everything your father and I sacrificed, every late shift, every college fund we built, every dream we set aside to give you the lives you have, that word cut deeper than you can imagine." Alexandra's professional mask slipped, her lips parting as a flush crept up her cheeks. "It was one comment, Mom," she said, in her voice tight, "made in a heated, stressful moment. You're taking it out of context." I tilted my head, considering her words. Perhaps, I allowed, but it revealed something profound about how you view familial duty, and that clarity has helped me make some difficult decisions. The table fell silent, the air thick with unspoken questions. Rebecca's voice, small and trembling, broke through. What decisions? She asked, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. I drew a slow breath, steadying myself. I've restructured my estate plan, I said, choosing my words carefully. The details aren't important right now, but you should know there have been significant changes from what your father and I originally intended. Jonathan, my son-in-law, leaned forward, his financial analyst instincts kicking in. Are you saying you've changed your will? He asked, his tone direct but laced with a hint of apprehension. I didn't answer immediately, letting the question hang in the air, a quiet assertion of my autonomy. The next day, Leanne, my real estate agent and a friend who'd become a confidant, drove me to a property that took my breath away. It wasn't the modest condo I'd expected to tour, but a grand three-story Victorian townhouse in the historic district, perched overlooking the harbor like a sentinel of time. Built in 1887, it stood with a faded elegance, its ornate cornices and delicate spindlework on the wraparound porch, hinting at a storied past. The paint was peeling in places, and the woodwork bore the scars of neglect, but the house exuded a quiet strength that stirred something deep within me. It's been in the same family for generations, Leanne explained as she unlocked the heavy front door. The last owner passed away 6 months ago at 97. Her heirs live abroad and want a buyer who will honor its historical significance. Stepping into the grand entryway, I was enveloped by a sense of timelessness. A sweeping staircase curved upward, framed by an original stained glass window that scattered jewel-tone light across the hardwood floor. The wallpaper was outdated, the carpets worn, but the house felt alive. Its high ceilings and ornate moldings whispering of lives lived fully within its walls. Leanne led me through the main floor, where a formal parlor and dining room opened to one another, their tall windows flooding the space with soft, golden light. The electrical and plumbing were updated 20 years ago, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the empty rooms. The kitchen and bathrooms could use modernizing, but the structure is remarkably solid. The foundation is excellent, and the roof was replaced just 5 years ago. We climbed to the second floor, where 4 bedrooms offered generous space and intricate details. Fireplaces with carved mantels, built-in bookshelves, windows that framed the harbor like paintings. The third floor, once a nursery and playroom, had a whimsical charm, its slanted ceilings and dormer windows evoking childhood dreams. Every room told a story, every scuffed floorboard and chipped tile a testament to the lives that had unfolded here. The backyard, though small, was a haven of dappled shade, with ancient oak trees arching over a stone patio. A detached carriage house, now a 2-car garage with an apartment above, offered practical flexibility, a space for a caregiver, should I ever need one, or a guest suite for visiting friends. What do you think? Leanne asked as we stood on the back patio, the sea breeze carrying the faint tang of salt. I gazed at the house, my heart torn between practicality and enchantment. It's far larger than I need be, I admitted, though the words felt hollow. The house had already woven itself into my imagination, its quiet dignity mirroring my own resolve to reclaim my life. Leanne smiled, undeterred. Perhaps, but it offers possibilities. You could live on this main floor if mobility becomes an issue. The carriage house could house a live-in aide, and in the meantime, you'd have space to grow into your new life, to host friends, pursue hobbies, create a home that reflects who you are now. I walked the property again, alone this time, envisioning its potential. Fresh paint, restored woodwork, a modern kitchen that honored the home's character. The asking price was $1.2 million, well within my means, thanks to the sale of our Vermont property and the financial resources my children underestimated. Standing on the porch, I felt a surge of decisive independence, a thrill I hadn't known in years. I'll take it, I said, turning to Leanne. Full price offer, with one condition, a 60-day closing to allow time for renovations to begin immediately. Her face lit up. The sellers will be thrilled, she said. They've turned down developers who wanted to carve it into condos. They'll love knowing it'll be restored. The offer was accepted the next day, and I dove into the transformation with a fervor that surprised even myself. I hired a contractor specializing in historic homes, an interior designer named Charlotte, who shared my vision of blending past and present, and a landscape architect to revive the garden with sustainable plantings. I said nothing to my children about the purchase. Their assumptions about my limited means, their subtle attempts to steer my decisions, had built a wall between us, one I wasn't ready to tear down. This was my metamorphosis, a chrysalis I'd woven in solitude, preparing for a flight they couldn't yet comprehend. The weeks before closing were a whirlwind of choices: paint swatches, light fixtures, bathroom tiles, appliances that balance form and function. With Josephine, a friend with a keen eye for antiques, I scoured auctions and estate sales, finding pieces that would breathe life into the home: a mahogany dining table, a velvet chaise, a brass chandelier that gleamed like a forgotten star. I consulted an accessibility specialist, incorporating subtle features to ensure I could age in place with grace: wider doorways, a discreet elevator hidden as a linen closet, a curbless shower in the master bath. Through it all, I kept my children at a cordial distance. Alexandra invited me to lunches, her questions about my investment advisor and estate plans thinly veiled. Michael offered to check my apartment for safety hazards, his eyes lingering on bookshelves and closets, as if cataloging my possessions. Rebecca, the most genuine, brought meals and her children for visits, though even she couldn't resist mentioning heirlooms she'd always loved, or probing about the Vermont sale. I deflected their inquiries with gentle firmness, neither lying nor revealing my plans. When pressed, I simply said, "My financial matters are being professionally managed, in line with my wishes." 3 days before closing, Eleanor, a dear friend, insisted on hosting a small gathering at her elegant condo. "It's not a housewarming if I haven't moved in," I teased. She laughed, undeterred. "Call it a celebration of your new chapter, then. Indulge an old woman who loves champagne and canapes." The evening was warm and intimate, attended by the Liberation ladies, my closest friends, along with Marianne, Leanne, and Charlotte. On Eleanor's terrace, with the harbor glittering below, Josephine raised her glass. "To Olivia," she said, her voice rich with affection, "who reminds us that self-respect never expires." Margot added, "And to the transformation of a woman and a historic home, may both shine with renewed purpose." Emotion swelled in my chest as I looked at these women, who'd supported me without judgment or expectation. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this, feeling this free, this sovereign. You've been my compass. The night was a quiet triumph, a moment to savor before stepping into the life I'd built for myself, brick by brick, choice by choice. The words of Eleanor lingered in my heart, a gentle echo that stirred something deep within me. "Nothing is ever truly gone," she had said, her voice soft yet resonant with a wisdom that seemed to transcend time. "It's merely waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, to bloom again." Her words felt like a lifeline, pulling me back to pieces of myself I'd long believed were lost, buried under years of routine, responsibility, and the quiet grief of widowhood. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense that I could reclaim the vibrancy of my youth, the dreams I'd set aside, and the courage to carve a new path forward. That evening, as the gathering at Eleanor's home began to wind down, the clink of glasses and the hum of conversation fading into a warm, comfortable quiet, Marianne drew me aside. Her touch on my arm was gentle, her eyes searching mine with a mix of concern and curiosity. "I've been meaning to ask," she said, her voice hushed, as though the question carried a weight she didn't want to burden the room with. "Have you decided how or when you'll tell your children about the house?" The question pierced me, stirring a knot of emotions I'd been wrestling with for weeks. I sighed, the weight of my decision settling heavily on my shoulders. "I've thought about it endlessly," I admitted, my voice low, almost confessional. "I've decided to wait until after I've moved in, once the essential renovations are done. I want them to see it as a done deal, a home I've already claimed, rather than a choice they think they can sway or critique." The words felt both liberating and daunting, a declaration of my resolve tinged with the fear of their reaction. Marianne nodded, her expression thoughtful, her lips pursed as she considered my words. That's probably wise, she said after a moment, her tone measured but supportive. From what you've told me about your children, they might try to step in if they get wind of it too soon. They'd call it concern, of course, but it could end up undermining your independence. Her words mirrored my own fears, validating the instinct I'd been grappling with. Exactly, I said, my voice firming with a conviction. This is one decision where I need to set a clear boundary. My home, my choice, my life. The words felt like a vow, a promise to myself to protect this newfound sense of agency, to guard it fiercely against the well-meaning but overbearing tendencies of my family. The following week, the moment I'd been dreaming of arrived. I closed on the Victorian townhouse, a grand old beauty in the historic Harbor District. The seller's attorney handed me the keys with a sense of ceremony, his hands steady but his eyes warm with emotion. Beatrice would be so pleased, he said, his voice thick with sentiment as he shared stories of the previous owner, a woman who had lived within those walls for 7 decades. She always said the house deserved someone who would cherish it, not just its structure or its charm, but its spirit, its soul. His words wrapped around me like a blessing, filling me with a profound sense of responsibility and connection to the home's legacy. I clutched the keys tightly, feeling as though I were holding not just metal, but a piece of history, a promise of new beginnings. Renovations began almost immediately, a whirlwind of activity that transformed the house into a living canvas of past and present. The contractors set up a command center in the dining room, spreading architectural plans across a massive oak table, their edges curling slightly under the weight of coffee mugs and pencil sketches. Shelves along one wall held neatly organized samples, swatches of paint, toulouse, and wood stains, each a small decision in the larger tapestry of the home's rebirth. I visited daily, drawn to the site like a moth to flame, my heart swelling with a mix of awe and anticipation as I watched the house come alive. The work was meticulous, a delicate dance between preservation and progress. Layers of faded wallpaper were peeled away with care, revealing the smooth, original plaster beneath, its imperfections a testament to the house's long life. Floorboards were lifted gently to make way for new wiring, each creak and groan a whisper of the home's history. Modern systems, new electrical panels, a state-of-the-art water heater, reinforcements for a section of the 3rd floor that had weathered minor water damage, were woven seamlessly into the historical framework. Every choice I made felt like a conversation with the house itself, a negotiation between honoring its past and preparing it for my future. I agonized over details, from the shade of paint in the parlor to the style of fixtures in the kitchen, each decision a step toward claiming this space as my own. 3 weeks into the renovation, as I stood in the half-finished living room, surrounded by the scent of sawdust and the hum of power tools, my phone rang. It was Alexandra, my eldest daughter, her voice bright with an enthusiasm that immediately put me on edge. "I'd love for you to come to Sunday dinner at my house," she said, her tone almost too cheerful, like a carefully rehearsed performance. "The whole family will be there. Michael and Lisa, Rebecca and Daniel, all the grandchildren. It's been far too long since we've all gathered." The invitation felt oddly timed. Alexandra wasn't one for spontaneous family gatherings. Her dinners were typically tied to holidays or milestones. "What's the occasion?" I asked, my curiosity tinged with suspicion. "Does there need to be a reason to bring family together?" she replied, her voice light, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. Something in her tone suggested there was more to this than simple togetherness, a hidden agenda waiting to reveal itself. I agreed to attend, my mind already turning over possibilities, my heart bracing for whatever lay beneath her cheerful facade. The truth became clear the moment I stepped into Alexandra's formal living room that Sunday. The air was thick with a forced casualness, a tension disguised as hospitality. All 3 of my children were there with their spouses, along with most of the grandchildren, though the teenagers had been promptly ushered to the basement media room after brief, polite hellos. The adults milled about, drinks in hand, their movements deliberate, their smiles a little too wide. Michael and Daniel stood by the fireplace, discussing golf scores with an exaggerated nonchalance that didn't fool me. Lisa and Rebecca fussed over platters of appetizers, elaborate spreads of smoked salmon, artisanal cheeses, and delicate pastries that far exceeded the usual family dinner fare. Alexandra approached me with a glass of mineral water, a slice of woman floating delicately within. "How's the shoulder, Mom?" she asked, her voice warm but her eyes sharp, assessing. "You seem to be moving more comfortably." "Much improved," I replied, flexing my arm slightly to demonstrate. "Almost back to normal." "That's wonderful," she said, her enthusiasm a touch too effusive. "We've all been so worried about you. Actually, that's part of why we wanted everyone together today. We've been talking, and we have some ideas we think you'll be excited about." There it was, the real reason for the gathering. Laid bare like a card played too soon. I took a slow sip of my water, bracing myself for what was to come. "I appreciate your concern," I said, my voice neutral, my eyes scanning the room for the reactions of my other children. Alexandra glanced at Michael and Rebecca, seeking their support before continuing. "We know how much you value your independence," she said, her words carefully chosen. "But we also worry about you living alone, especially after your fall." Michael set down his scotch, stepping into the conversation with the confidence of someone who believed he held the upper hand. "Mom, we've been researching some fantastic senior living communities," he said, his tone earnest but patronizing. "Not nursing homes," he added quickly, as though the clarification could soften the blow. "Luxury, independent living apartments with all sorts of amenities and support services." "Willow Ridge Estates," Lisa interjected, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "It's like a five-star resort, swimming pool, gourmet dining, classes, social events, and discreet medical support if you ever need it." I noted their careful avoidance of the word assisted, though it was clear that was exactly what they were proposing. Their words painted a picture of a gilded cage, a place where I'd be safe but stripped of the life I was building for myself. "That sounds lovely," I said mildly, my tone betraying none of the irritation simmering within. "For someone who wants that kind of lifestyle." Rebecca leaned forward, her expression hopeful, almost pleading. "We thought you might consider touring it with us next weekend," she said. "Just to see, no pressure. They have a 2-bedroom unit available on the ground floor, overlooking the gardens," Alexandra added, her voice smooth but insistent. "We could put a deposit down to hold it while you decide." I set my glass on a coaster, straightening in my chair, my resolve hardening. "I'm not interested in Willow Ridge Estates or any similar community at this time," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Thank you for the research, though." Their faces shifted in unison, hope giving way to concern, a collective frown that felt rehearsed. "Mom, we're just trying to help plan for your future," Michael said, his tone taking on that condescending cadence adults use when they think they know better. "After your fall, it's clear that living alone in a regular apartment isn't the safest option. And the social aspect is important too." Rebecca nodded, her voice soft but insistent. "Studies show that isolation is a major health risk for seniors," she said, as though I were unaware of my own vibrant social life. The Liberation Ladies, my library volunteering, the book club that had become a weekly highlight. I smiled, thinking of the laughter and camaraderie that filled my days. "I assure you my social calendar is quite full," I said, my tone light but pointed. Alexandra leaned forward, her courtroom voice emerging, precise, persuasive, with an undercurrent of authority that made my hackles rise. "Mom, we're concerned that you might not be making decisions with a clear understanding of the risks and limitations you'll face as you age," she said. The implication was unmistakable. They doubted my judgment, my ability to steer my own life. In that moment, a decision crystallized within me, one I hadn't planned to reveal so soon. "Actually," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions within, "I've already made arrangements for my future living situation. I've purchased a new home." The room fell silent, the air heavy with shock and disbelief. My children's faces froze, their expressions a mix of confusion and incredulity. "Purchased a home?" Alexandra repeated, her voice slow as though testing the words for truth. "What kind of home?" "A Victorian townhouse in the historic Harbor District," I replied, maintaining an even tone despite the satisfaction that bubbled within me. "The renovations are underway, and I expect to move in within 6 to 8 weeks." For a moment, no one spoke. Then chaos erupted, my 3 children talking over one another, their voices rising in a cacophony of protest. How could you possibly afford that? Michael demanded. The Harbor District is one of the most expensive areas in the city. You made this decision without discussing it with us? Rebecca asked, her voice trembling with hurt. I raised a hand, silencing them with a calm authority I hadn't realized I possessed. I purchased the home with funds from the sale of the Vermont property and my personal savings, I said. The decision was mine to make, and I made it after careful consideration of my needs and preferences. Michael sputtered, his face reddening. But Mom, those old houses are money pits. The maintenance alone has been factored into my budget, I interrupted smoothly, as have the necessary renovations to make it suitable for aging in place. Alexandra's legal mind was visibly at work, her eyes narrowing as she searched for a flaw in my plan. Is this why you've been meeting with that estate attorney? She asked. To finance this purchase? Mom, if you've taken out a mortgage at your age, the terms could be predatory. I paid cash, I said simply, watching her composure falter. No mortgage, no financing. My meetings with Marianne Thornfield were about estate planning, not the home purchase. When Lisa, ever the one to speak her mind, blurted out what the others were likely thinking. But how could you afford a house in the Harbor District? Those start at over $1 million. I met her gaze steadily, my voice calm but unwavering. As I've mentioned before, your father made some sound investments that have performed well over the years. The Vermont property sale provided additional capital. My financial situation is more secure than you have assumed. Rebecca's brow furrowed, her voice soft with genuine confusion. But a house that size just for you? It seems so excessive. It's precisely what I want, I replied, my tone leaving no room for debate. Space to pursue my interests, to entertain friends, and yes, to accommodate family when you visit. It's a home that reflects who I am and how I want to live. The room fell quiet again, the weight of my words settling over them. For the first time I saw a flicker of realization in their eyes, a recognition that I was not the fragile, dependent figure they had imagined, but a woman with agency, dreams, and a future of her own making. Olivia Richardson sat at the head of the polished dining table, her hands folded calmly in her lap, though her heart thrummed with a mix of anticipation and resolve. The room buzzed with the subtle clink of silverware and the low hum of her children's voices, each carefully modulating their tone to mask the undercurrent of shock that had rippled through them moments earlier. She had just revealed her purchase of a grand Victorian townhouse in the Harbor District, a decision she'd made with deliberate care, one that had sent her children, Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca, into a quiet frenzy of recalibration. Their eyes, sharp and searching, betrayed the mental arithmetic at work, reassessing her wealth, her independence, and perhaps, most unsettlingly, their own place in her life. Olivia felt a pang of amusement tinged with sadness as she watched Alexandra, her eldest, regain her composure first. At 47, Alexandra was a corporate attorney, her life a tightly orchestrated symphony of boardrooms and calculated risks. Her tailored blazer and crisp demeanor couldn't hide the flicker of unease in her green eyes. Well, Alexandra said, her voice smooth but laced with a lawyer's precision, this is certainly unexpected. I look forward to seeing this house once you're settled. Her words were polite, but Olivia sensed the unspoken questions piling up behind them. Questions about money, about control, about how their mother, a 73-year-old widow, had managed to upend their assumptions so thoroughly. Thank you, dear, Olivia replied, her tone warm but unyielding. I'm eager to show it to you. The third floor has a charming space that I think the grandchildren will love as a playroom. She paused, letting the image settle, knowing it would stir their imaginations further. Shall we move to the dining room? Dinner should be ready. Her suggestion was met with nods, and the family transitioned to the next room, where the aroma of roasted lamb and rosemary filled the air. But the evening's civility felt like a tightrope walk. Conversation danced around safe topics. Sophia's debate team victories, Mason's soccer tryouts, the twins' latest obsession with science experiments. Yet beneath the surface, Olivia could feel her children grappling with the revelation, their minds racing to understand the implications for their own futures, their inheritances. As the night drew to a close, Michael, her 44-year-old son, lingered by the coat rack, his broad shoulders tense as he helped her into her jacket. A construction company owner, he was used to taking charge, his hands calloused from years of overseeing projects. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial, "before you get too far with this renovation, I'd really like to look over the plans and contractor bids, just to make sure you're getting quality work at fair prices." His concern sounded genuine, but Olivia caught the undertone of control, the assumption that she needed his oversight. She smiled, her voice gentle but firm. "Thank you, Michael, but I have complete confidence in my team. The architect specializes in historic preservation, and the contractor was recommended by the Historical Society." His face flickered with frustration, quickly masked by a nod. "Well, the offer stands if you change your mind," he said, his tone clipped. Olivia nodded, sensing a struggle to reconcile the mother he thought he knew with the woman who had just purchased a townhouse without his input. In the taxi Alexandra had insisted on calling, Olivia leaned back against the cool leather seat, her mind a tangle of emotions. There was satisfaction in asserting her autonomy, a quiet thrill at living on her own terms for the first time since Gerald's death. But there was also a deep ache, a recognition that her relationships with her children had become transactional, their concern less about her well-being and more about the trust fund Gerald had left behind. As the city lights blurred past, she felt a spark of excitement for the future, a future she was crafting with her own hands, her own desires. The next morning, Olivia dialed Eleanor Whitford, her friend and a retired judge whose sharp wit and unapologetic candor never failed to lift her spirits. "Oh, to have been a fly on that wall," Eleanor chuckled after Olivia recounted the previous evening. "Did Alexandra really almost drop her wine glass when you told them about the house?" "Nearly," Olivia admitted, a laugh bubbling up. "She recovered quickly, but I've never seen her so speechless. It was as if I'd rewritten the rules of the game they thought we were playing." "And now," Eleanor asked, her voice turning serious, "do you think they'll adjust their approach to you?" Olivia sighed, her gaze drifting to the window where morning light spilled across her apartment. "They'll certainly rethink their assumptions about my finances. Whether that translates to respecting my independence, that's another question." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee mug. "I've spent so long being the mother they expected, steady, predictable, always there. Now I'm choosing myself, and it's unsettling them." Eleanor's voice was firm, almost gleeful. "They're about to discover that the mother they underestimated is now the queen of her own castle. That's bound to shake things up." "Queen of my own castle," Olivia repeated, the phrase settling into her like a warm ember. "I like the sound of that." The revelation about the townhouse sparked a shift in her children's behavior, as sudden and overwhelming as a summer storm, where once their visits had been sporadic, now they were relentless. Daily phone calls, unannounced visits, unsolicited advice on everything from paint colors to plumbing fixtures. It was as if they believed their presence could reassert their influence over her decisions. Olivia felt both amused and suffocated by their newfound attention, their motives as transparent as glass. Alexandra was the most direct, arriving one morning at Olivia's apartment with a box of pastries from a high-end bakery and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At 47, she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the cozy clutter of Olivia's kitchen. "I thought we could have breakfast together before my first meeting," Alexandra said, brushing past Olivia to arrange croissants on a plate with the ease of someone claiming territory. "I can't stop thinking about this house of yours. I'd love to see the plans, maybe offer some input on the renovation." Olivia accepted the coffee Alexandra poured, her eyes narrowing slightly. "The plans are finalized, dear. Construction is well underway." Alexandra waved this off as if it were a trivial detail. "Plans can always be adjusted. Jonathan's cousin is an architect, you know. He specializes in residential properties. I'm sure he'd be happy to review everything, ensure you are getting the best outcome." "I'm quite satisfied with my architect," Olivia said, her voice calm but unyielding. "Edward Lawrence has restored several historic properties in the district. His work is exemplary." Alexandra's smile tightened, a flicker of frustration crossing her face. "Edward Lawrence. His firm charges premium rates. I hope you negotiated a fair fee structure." His rates reflect his expertise, Olivia replied, her tone even. And yes, we agreed on a reasonable compensation arrangement. Alexandra took a delicate bite of croissant, her eyes studying Olivia with the intensity of a cross-examination. Mom, I can't help wondering where all this is coming from. This sudden major purchase, these extensive renovations. It's not like you to make such dramatic changes, especially without consulting us. Olivia tilted her head, her voice soft but pointed. Isn't it? Or is it that you've never considered I might have desires and capabilities beyond the role you've assigned me as your mother? Alexandra set her coffee cup down with a sharp click, her composure faltering. That's unfair. Of course I see you as a complete person. I'm just concerned you might be making impulsive decisions at a vulnerable time, after Dad's death, the fall, the recovery. It would be understandable if you were seeking a change to distract from grief. Olivia nearly laughed at the armchair psychology, but she kept her expression serene. I appreciate your concern, Alexandra, but my decisions are neither impulsive nor driven by grief. They're the result of careful thought about how I want to live the rest of my life. And financially, Alexandra presses, leaning forward. Are you certain this makes sense long-term? Harbor District properties come with high taxes, maintenance costs. Alexandra, Olivia interrupted gently. My financial situation is secure. Gerald and I planned carefully for various contingencies. The house is well within my means, both for purchase and upkeep. Alexandra's eyes narrowed, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. Mom, let's be direct. How significant are these investments Dad apparently made? Are we talking a few $100,000 in stocks or bonds? Even that wouldn't justify the expenditure you're describing. Olivia met her daughter's gaze steadily. I've disclosed what's necessary, that I have sufficient resources for my needs and choices. The specifics aren't relevant to this conversation. They are if you're depleting capital that would otherwise constitute your estate, Alexandra countered, then immediately flushed, as if realizing she'd revealed too much. She forced a smile. I mean, of course, your well-being comes first, but responsible financial management includes considering all stakeholders. Olivia's voice was soft, almost tender. So that's the concern, not my well-being, but the potential impact on your inheritance. That's not what I meant, Alexandra said quickly, her tone defensive. I just want to ensure you're managing everything responsibly. I am, Olivia assured her, her voice firm, and I'm quite clear about who the stakeholders are regarding my personal assets. Alexandra left soon after, her frustration palpable, though she masked it with a polite goodbye. Olivia watched her go, a mix of resolve and sorrow settling in her chest. Her daughter's questions weren't about concern, but control, a desire to protect what she saw as her future share of Gerald's legacy. Michael took a different tack, arriving the following weekend with a toolbox and a forced grin. Thought I'd check that loose cabinet door you mentioned last month, he said, though Olivia had made no such complaint. While I'm here, maybe we could swing by the new house. I'd love to see how the renovation's coming along. His strategy was transparent, almost comically so, but Olivia saw no harm in indulging him. Perhaps seeing the house would help him accept her decision. That would be fine, she said, but there's no need to fix anything here. The cabinet doors are perfectly functional. Michael looked momentarily thrown, but recovered with a shrug. Well, prevention's better than repair. Let me take a quick look, then we can head over. As they drove to the Harbor District, Olivia watched her son's profile, noting the tension in his jaw. He was grappling with the same realization as Alexandra, that their mother, the quiet widow they'd underestimated, was charting her own course. And for the first time, Olivia felt not just the weight of their expectations, but the freedom of casting them aside. As I watched Michael move through my modest apartment, his eyes scanning with a practiced curiosity, a faint smile tugged at my lips. His inspection was less about assessing the space and more about a subtle hunt for clues. Financial documents, perhaps, or anything that might hint at the resources I'd been managing since Gerald's passing. He opened closets and cabinets with a casual air, as if checking for structural integrity. But I knew better. My amusement was tinged with a quiet ache. My son, ever the contractor, couldn't resist calculating the worth of things, even when it came to his own mother. Finding nothing to satiate his curiosity, he gave a nod, declared the apartment in good shape, and ushered me toward his SUV for the short drive to the Harbor District. As we neared the Victorian townhouse I'd recently purchased, a swell of pride bloomed in my chest, laced with a flutter of anticipation. The house stood tall despite the scaffolding clinging to its side and the construction dumpster squatting in the driveway. Its weathered brick facade and intricate cornices spoke of a resilience that mirrored my own, a bit worn by time perhaps, but unyielding in its dignity. I allowed myself a private smile, feeling a kinship with the old structure, both of us standing firm against the years. Michael let out a low whistle as he parked across the street, his contractor's instincts kicking in. "This place is massive," he said, his tone a mix of awe and skepticism. "How many square feet are we talking?" I tilted my head, savoring the moment. "Just under 4,000 for the main house," I replied, "plus another 800 for the carriage house apartment." His eyebrows shot up, and I could almost see the numbers churning in his mind. "Mom, that's a lot of space for one person." His words carried a faint edge of concern, or perhaps disbelief. "It suits my needs," I said simply, leading him to the front entrance. My fingers danced over the temporary lockbox, entering the code with a quiet confidence, as if unlocking not just a door, but a new chapter of my life. Inside, the house was a work in progress, yet its potential shone through the dust and disarray. The entrance hall, stripped of its outdated wallpaper, revealed ornate moldings that had been painstakingly restored to their original glory. Gaps in the hardwood floors hinted at the electrical upgrades underway, and tarps draped over corners marked areas still awaiting their transformation. But the bones of the house, its soaring ceilings, expansive rooms, and the way sunlight poured through the tall windows spoke of a grandeur that nothing could diminish. I felt a quiet thrill walking through it, imagining the life I'd build here, a space that was mine alone. Michael moved slowly, his eyes sharp and assessing, taking in every detail with the critical gaze of a man who'd spent years in construction. I could sense his mind at work, tallying costs, weighing the quality of the finishes, scrutinizing the craftsmanship. In the master suite, he lingered over the newly installed bathroom, its zero-entry shower and cleverly disguised grab bars, designed to look like elegant towel racks, drawing his particular attention. I watched him, wondering if he saw the care behind these choices, the way they blended practicality with beauty to ensure I could age gracefully in this home. "This is high-end work," he said at last, his voice neutral, but his eyes betraying a flicker of respect. We moved to the kitchen, where custom cabinetry was being fitted, each piece crafted to honor the house's history while embracing modern function. "Looks like you're not cutting any corners," he added, a note of curiosity creeping in. "I'm investing in quality and longevity," I corrected gently, my tone firm but warm. "Every choice balances the house's historical character with the conveniences I need." I wanted him to understand that this wasn't extravagance but intention, a deliberate act of creating a home that would carry me through the years ahead. Michael's brow furrowed slightly, a shadow of doubt crossing his face. "And you're managing this whole project yourself?" His question wasn't just about logistics. It carried a weight of skepticism, as if he couldn't quite believe I was capable of overseeing such an endeavor. "I have an excellent project manager," I replied, unruffled. "She was recommended by my architect and coordinates everything, contractors, timelines, decisions. I get weekly updates and weigh in when needed." His frown deepened, and I braced myself for what was coming. "You know, Mom, Henderson Construction could have handled this at a better rate. My crews know old homes like this." There it was, the subtle pitch, the implication that he could have done better, saved me money, kept things in the family. "I'm sure they're skilled," I acknowledged, choosing my words carefully, "but I wanted specialists in historical restoration. The craftsmanship here requires a specific touch." I could see the tension in his jaw, the frustration of a man used to being in control, now faced with a mother who was charting her own course. As we moved through the house, his unease grew more palpable. In the formal dining room, now a makeshift project headquarters, he paused at the table where architectural plans were spread out like a map of my ambitions. His fingers traced the lines of the drawings, his eyes narrowing. "This level of renovation must be costing a fortune," he said bluntly, his voice cutting through the quiet. "The millwork alone, Those are custom reproductions of the original details, aren't they? I nodded, my calm unshaken. Where possible, we're restoring the originals. When that's not an option, we're having replacements crafted to match. He turned to face me, his expression a mix of concern and something sharper, suspicion perhaps. Mom, how are you funding this? Even with the sale of the Vermont property, the numbers don't add up based on what I know about you and Dad's finances. His words hung heavy, and I felt a pang of disappointment, not at his question, but at the assumption behind it, that I owed him an explanation, that my choices needed his approval. I kept my voice steady, my demeanor composed. As I've told Alexandra, Gerald made investments that performed well over the years. Our financial situation was stronger than you children realized. How strong? He pressed, his tone insistent. Are we talking low seven figures, more? I met his gaze evenly, refusing to be rattled. Sufficient resources for me to live comfortably and make the choices that suit my needs. The specifics aren't relevant to our conversation. Frustration flashed across his face, his hands clenching briefly at his sides. Mom, I'm in construction. I can estimate what this is costing, combined with the purchase price of this place. That's serious money. If Dad left that kind of wealth, don't you think his kids deserve to know? I felt a quiet resolve settle over me, a reminder of the boundaries Gerald and I had always maintained. Your father and I agreed that our financial matters were private, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. That hasn't changed with his passing. Michael's jaw tightened, his eyes searching mine for a crack in my resolve, but I held firm. But it affects us, he insisted. If there are substantial assets, there are tax implications, estate planning considerations, all of which are being handled professionally, I cut in smoothly. Marianne Thornfield is managing my estate planning with great care. My tone left no room for argument, and I saw the moment he realized he wouldn't get more from me. The drive back to my apartment was heavy with unspoken tension. Michael's frustration simmering in the silence. As he pulled up to my building, he made one final attempt. Mom, I hope you know you can trust us. Whatever Dad left, however much it is, we just want to make sure it's protected for your security and the family's future. His words were earnest, but they carried an undercurrent of entitlement that stung. I reached over, patting his hand gently. I know exactly what I'm doing, Michael, I said, my voice warm but resolute. And I'm doing what your father and I always intended. The following week, Rebecca's approach was softer, more calculated, but no less purposeful. She invited me to lunch at her home, ensuring her 12-year-old twins, Lily and Emma, were there to greet me with their infectious energy. My heart swelled at the sight of them, their chatter about school and soccer, filling the air with a warmth I cherished. Rebecca played the gracious host, keeping the conversation light as we ate, her smile easy but her eyes watchful. I knew her well enough to sense the undercurrent of her intentions, the way she waited for the perfect moment to steer the conversation. As the girls dug into their dessert, their laughter fading into the background, she leaned closer, her voice soft and intimate. The girls miss you, Mom, she said, her tone laced with genuine affection, but also something more deliberate. We all do. I was thinking, once you're settled in the new house, we could start a family dinner tradition. Sunday evenings, maybe. It'd be a chance for the cousins to bond and for us to stay close. The suggestion was wrapped in warmth, and I couldn't deny the appeal of it. Rebecca had always been the most emotionally attuned of my children, her ability to read a room unmatched. Yet I couldn't ignore the timing of her proposal, coming so soon after the revelation of my financial resources. It felt less like a spontaneous gesture and more like a carefully laid stepping stone to a larger conversation. That's a lovely idea, I replied, my smile genuine but cautious. Though perhaps not every Sunday. My social calendar's getting quite full these days. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. Oh, what kind of activities? She asked. Her curiosity piqued. I savored the moment, letting her see a side of me she hadn't expected. I've joined a book club that meets twice a month, I said. There's my volunteer work at the library, which I love. And I've fallen in with a group of wonderful women, the liberation ladies they call themselves. We have lunches, cultural outings, even the occasional weekend trip. I watched her expression shift, a mix of admiration and something like unease, as if she were recalculating her understanding of me. That sounds active, she said, her voice tinged with hesitation. I had no idea you had so many commitments. I tilted my head, my tone gentle but pointed. There's a lot about my life you haven't asked about, Rebecca. Her cheeks flushed slightly, a rare moment of self-consciousness for my poised daughter. I guess we all got used to you being there whenever we needed you, she admitted, her fingers twisting the edge of her napkin. Yes, I agreed, my voice soft but firm. That was the pattern, wasn't it? But patterns can change. She hesitated, then shifted gears, her voice dropping lower as the twins' chatter continued at the far end of the table. Mom, about the house. Alexandra mentioned you've hired some top-tier professionals for the renovation. I nodded, sensing the pivot. I have excellent people working on it, yes. She pressed on, her tone careful but probing. And you're comfortable with the expense? It must be significant. I smiled, my patience unwavering. As I've told Alexandra and Michael, I have the resources to meet my needs and make my choices. The renovation is well within my budget. Rebecca leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, is there more that Dad left? More than what was in the will? Her eyes searched mine and I felt a twinge of sadness. Not for her question, but for the way my children seemed to see my independence as a puzzle to be solved rather than a life to be respected. Your father and I built a secure foundation over the years, I said evenly. The details aren't important for you to know, except that I'm well provided for. Her expression faltered, a flicker of frustration crossing her face, but she seemed to sense I wouldn't budge. After a moment, she tried a different angle, her voice soft but deliberate. The thing is, Mom, Daniel and I have been talking about the twins' college funds. With education costs skyrocketing and we're worried about having enough saved by the time they're ready for university, especially if they follow the family tradition of pursuing advanced degrees. There it was, the heart of her invitation, laid bare with a vulnerability that tugged at my heart, even as it sharpened my resolve. Higher education is expensive, I acknowledged, my tone sympathetic but measured. You and Daniel are wise to plan ahead. She hesitated, then pushed forward, her words careful but unmistakable. We were wondering if there might be any possibility of assistance, not now necessarily, but maybe a commitment we could count on down the line. If Dad left substantial investments, her voice trailed off and I felt the weight of her expectation, the hope that I might open a door she could step through. But I held firm, my heart steady even as it ached for the distance this conversation revealed between us. As I gazed at my daughter Rebecca's face, so strikingly reminiscent of her father Gerald's with those hormone, chestnut brown eyes and softly rounded cheeks, a wave of tenderness washed over me. Of my 3 children, Rebecca had always been the one to wear her heart on her sleeve, the one who cherished family ties not for their utility, but for the deep emotional currents they carried. Yet, in this moment, I saw a flicker of something else in her expression, a subtle calculation, a quiet hope that perhaps there were resources, untapped and waiting, that she might secure for her own children. Her voice was soft, almost tentative, as she broached the subject of her twins' education, suggesting that a portion of our family's assets might be set aside for their future. The words hung in the air, delicate but weighted with expectation. Rebecca, I said, my tone gentle but firm, your father and I poured our hearts into giving you and your siblings the best start we could. We supported you through university and graduate school, stood by Michael through the rocky starts of his business ventures until his construction company found its footing, and helped Alexandra with law school and her first home. Those were investments in your futures, ones we made without a second thought, and we've never once regretted them. Rebecca's eyes brightened, and she nodded quickly, her voice warm with gratitude. We're so thankful for that, Mom, truly. But beneath her words, I sensed a lingering hope, a quiet plea that there might be more to give. I smiled, choosing my next words with care. I'm glad to hear that, sweetheart. But your father and I always believed that providing for the next generation, your children's education, their opportunities. That's your responsibility now, yours and your siblings. We gave you the tools to build successful lives, not just for yourselves, but so you could pass that stability onto your own families. Her face shifted, a subtle shadow of disappointment crossing her features, though she masked it with a nod. Of course I understand, she said, her voice steady but tinged with resignation. It's just, with how expensive everything is now and the competition for good schools, it's daunting. I reached out, resting a hand on hers. You and Daniel are both thriving professionals. You have the means and the time to plan for the twins' future. They're only 12. There are years ahead to prepare. The conversation drifted to lighter topics after that. But Rebecca's cheerful demeanor couldn't fully conceal the undercurrent of disappointment that lingered in her eyes. As I gathered my things to leave, she made one final gesture, her voice warm but deliberate. Mom, if the house ever feels like too much to manage on your own, you know you're always welcome here. The girls would adore having you with us. The offer was heartfelt, or so it seemed, yet I couldn't help but notice its timing, coming only after I gently declined to fund the twins' education. Was it a genuine expression of love, or a strategic move to keep the door open for future support? I pushed the thought aside, embracing her warmly. That's so kind of you, Rebecca, but I'm actually excited to carve out my own space, on my own terms. In the weeks that followed, my children's efforts to probe into my financial situation grew more persistent, their approaches cloaked in care but unmistakably deliberate. Alexandra invited me to a lunch where, by pure coincidence, her estate planning colleague was free to chat about hypothetical scenarios involving significant assets. The colleague's questions were polite but pointed, and I deflected them with practiced ease, my smile never wavering. Michael, meanwhile, sent his construction company's interior designer to my home, armed with glossy catalogs of furnishings perfect for a historic property like mine. He dangled the promise of employee discounts, but only if I ordered through him, a subtle bid to intertwine his business with my plans. Rebecca, undeterred, began emailing me listings for elite private schools, casually noting scholarship options, but emphasizing how her twins deserved the very best, just as I'd always wanted for my own children. Their maneuvers were transparent, yet I maintained my boundaries with a calm resolve, offering neither the financial details they sought nor encouragement for their thinly veiled attempts to stake claims on resources they suspected I held. Instead, I immersed myself in my renovation project, in the laughter and camaraderie of my Liberation Ladies friends, and in the quiet excitement of shaping this new chapter of my life. Then came the moment that shattered the fragile equilibrium. 6 weeks into the renovation, Marianne Thornfield, my trusted attorney, arrived at my apartment unannounced. Her face was etched with concern as she settled onto my sofa, waving off my offer of tea. Olivia, she began, her voice measured but grave. There's something you need to know. Alexandra contacted our firm yesterday, requesting a meeting with our managing partner, Harold Whitman. I raised an eyebrow, a prickle of unease stirring within me. On what grounds? Marianne's lips tightened. She presented herself as your daughter and attorney, raising concerns about your recent financial decisions. She suggested you might be vulnerable, possibly under undue influence from new advisors following your injury. A cold weight settled in my chest, sharp and unyielding. She has no standing as my attorney, I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. Harold made that abundantly clear, Marianne assured me. He told her I represent you exclusively and that any concerns should go through proper channels with your permission. But Alexandra was persistent. She implied that your recent behavior, buying an expensive property, making lavish renovation choices, and being unusually secretive about your finances might indicate cognitive impairment. The words hit like a blow, stealing my breath. She what? My voice came out sharper than I intended, slicing through the quiet of the room. Marianne softened her tone. She didn't say those exact words, but the implication was unmistakable. She framed it as concern, citing your uncharacteristic decisions as evidence of diminished capacity. That's absurd, I snapped, my anger flaring despite my efforts to rein it in. I'm perfectly competent. Of course you are, Marianne said firmly. Harold shut it down immediately. He warned her that questioning a client's competence without medical evidence tread dangerously close to defamation, and claiming an attorney-client relationship where none exists raises ethical red flags. And how did she respond? I asked, bracing myself. Not well, Marianne admitted. She doubled down, saying that as your daughter and a fellow attorney, she has unique insight into your decision-making patterns. She even suggested that our firm's failure to investigate her concerns could be seen as negligence. I closed my eyes, a wave of betrayal crashing over me. She's fishing for information about my finances by painting me as incompetent. That's my assessment, Marianne confirmed. Harold suggested that if she truly believes you're cognitively impaired, she should consult medical professionals, not try to bypass attorney-client privilege. But she didn't commit to any course of action, which is why I'm here. In my experience, when adult children start questioning a parent's competence, especially when significant assets might be involved, things can escalate quickly. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. Thank you for telling me. What do you recommend? Marianne leaned forward, her voice steady and pragmatic. First, I suggest a comprehensive cognitive assessment with a geriatric specialist, not because you need it, but to create a formal record of your mental clarity. Second, we should draft power of attorney documents, naming someone you trust completely, someone with no financial stake in your estate. Finally, we could consider recording our next major legal discussion to document your full understanding of your decisions. Those are sensible steps, I agreed, my mind already turning to logistics. I'll arrange the assessment right away. As for the power of attorney, I'd like to discuss options. By the time Marianne left, we had crafted a thorough plan to safeguard my autonomy. It was a necessary strategy, professional and precise. Yet beneath my composed exterior, a deep sadness gnawed at me. That Alexandra, my own daughter, would resort to such a tactic, insinuating I was incompetent to pry into my finances, cut deeper than I could have imagined. The betrayal left a hollow ache in my chest, one I wasn't sure how to mend. I had barely begun to process this when my phone rang. It was Eleanor, a close friend, her voice taut with urgency. Olivia, are you free? There's something you need to hear. What is it? I asked, already steeling myself for more. I was at Claudet's salon downtown this afternoon, she began, her words careful but heavy. Alexandra was there, in the chair next to mine. She was on her phone talking to someone named Jonathan. Your son-in-law, right? Yes, I confirmed, my heart sinking. She was speaking about you quite openly, Eleanor continued, her discomfort palpable. She mentioned exploring guardianship options if you keep making irrational financial decisions and refuse appropriate family oversight. She said she's consulting an elder law specialist about having you declared. Eleanor hesitated, reluctant to finish. Incompetent, I said flatly, the word bitter on my tongue. Yes, she admitted. She talked about documenting erratic behavior and concerning patterns since your fall in recovery. Olivia, it didn't sound like a casual conversation. It felt coordinated. The room seemed to close in around me, the air thick with the sting of betrayal. My children, whom I had raised and supported with every ounce of my love, were now orchestrating a strategy to undermine my independence. I thanked Eleanor for her honesty, my voice calm despite the storm raging within. As I hung up, I sat in silence, grappling with the reality that the family I had cherished was fracturing under the weight of their own ambitions. Yet even in my grief, a quiet resolve took root. I would protect my autonomy, my choices, my life on my own terms, no matter the cost. My grip on the phone tightened as Eleanor's words sank in, each syllable a sharp reminder of the delicate balance I was fighting to maintain. My heart raced, not with fear, but with a quiet, resolute anger, a mother's fierce determination to protect what was hers. Thank you for telling me, Eleanor, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. It seems my daughter is moving faster than I expected. Eleanor's tone softened, laced with concern. What will you do? She asked. Whatever it takes to safeguard my independence, I replied, my words carrying the weight of a vow, spoken with the calm certainty of someone who had faced loss and emerged stronger. After hanging up, I stood still for a moment, the silence of my apartment amplifying the thoughts swirling in my mind. My children, Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca, were circling, their intentions cloaked in concern, but threatening the autonomy I'd fought so hard to reclaim after my husband's death. I took a series of deep, deliberate breaths, grounding myself for the battle ahead. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a stand for my right to exist as more than a mother, a widow, or a figure to be managed. I composed a text to my children. Family meeting at my apartment, 7 p.m. tonight. Attendance is non-negotiable. No spouses or children, please. Alexandra responded first, her message clipped and professional as always. I have a client dinner. Can we reschedule for tomorrow? My fingers hovered over the screen, a flicker of frustration igniting. This is not optional. Cancel your plans, I typed back, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. Michael's reply came next, tinged with worry. Is everything okay? Health issue? We'll discuss when you arrive, I responded, keeping my cards close. Rebecca, ever the quiet one, simply wrote, I'll be there. Her brevity spoke volumes, a mix of duty and unease. The hours before their arrival were a flurry of preparation, both emotional and tactical. I called Dr. Mbe Chen, a geriatric specialist Marianne had recommended, my heart pounding as I secured an appointment for a cognitive assessment the next morning. A rare slot opened by a cancellation. The call felt like a lifeline, a step toward fortifying my position with undeniable proof of my mental clarity. Next, I reviewed financial reports from my investment advisor, poring over every figure to confirm the strength of my accounts. Each number was a testament to the life my husband and I had built, a legacy I was determined to control. Finally, I contacted my project manager at the Victorian townhouse I'd recently purchased, my voice firm as I instructed her to fast-track the renovation, prioritizing the master suite and kitchen. 3 weeks, I told her, no delays. This was my sanctuary, my declaration of independence, and I needed it ready. By the time my children arrived, I was a fortress of calm resolve, my emotions carefully tucked beneath a composed exterior. Alexandra swept in first, her tailored suit and neutral expression, a shield honed by years in the courtroom. Michael followed, his brow creased with concern, his eyes searching mine for answers. Rebecca entered last, her gaze flickering nervously between her siblings and me, her hands twisting in her lap as she sat. I gestured to the living room seating, my voice steady as I began. Thank you for coming. We need to address a situation that's come to my attention. Rebecca's voice trembled as she leaned forward. Mom, are you okay? You seem upset. I nodded, my heart aching at her worry, but unwilling to soften the truth. I am upset, I admitted, my words measured. Today, I learned 2 troubling things. First, Alexandra, you contacted Marianne Thornfield's firm, suggesting I might be mentally unfit to manage my finances. Alexandra's posture stiffened, her chin lifting in a defensive reflex. That's an exaggeration, she said, her voice cool but sharp. I raised legitimate concerns about your recent financial decisions, sudden, uncharacteristic moves after a traumatic injury. Any responsible daughter would do the same. I held her gaze, my tone soft but unyielding. Is that why you were overheard at Claudette's salon discussing guardianship strategies with Jonathan? Planning to have me declared incompetent if I refused appropriate family oversight? Alexandra's eyes widened, a fleeting crack in her polished facade, betraying her surprise. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but the words lacked conviction. Michael turned to her, his expression a mix of shock and betrayal. You're pursuing guardianship without even talking to us? He demanded. Alexandra's composure wavered, her voice softening as she scrambled to justify herself. I was exploring options to protect Mom's interests. After her fall, she's making major decisions, buying an expensive property, refusing to share details. Those are red flags. I leaned forward, my voice steady but laced with steel. Red flags for what exactly? For a woman reclaiming her independence? For a widow deciding how to use the wealth she and her husband built over decades? Or are they red flags because they disrupt your expectations of an inheritance? Rebecca's voice broke through, small and pained. That's not fair, Mom. We're worried about you, not money. My heart twisted at her words, but I pressed on, my gaze softening but firm. Are you? Then why does every conversation since I bought the house circle back to my finances? Why the sudden interest in college funds for the twins? Michael's offers to manage the renovation? Your attempts, Alexandra, to insert yourself into my estate planning? The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling like a fog. My children shifted uncomfortably, their eyes avoiding mine. Let me be clear, I continued, my voice steady as a heartbeat. I am mentally sound. My decisions are deliberate, informed, and mine alone. I will not tolerate attempts to undermine my autonomy through whispers of incompetence. Alexandra's tone shifted to conciliation, her lawyer's instinct kicking in. Mom, we're not questioning your competence outright, but major life changes, Dad's death, your injury, living alone, can cloud anyone's judgment. We're trying to offer support, oversight to prevent mistakes. Oversight, I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. A word that implies authority you don't have. I am not answerable to you about my financial choices. Michael interjected, his voice heavy with emotion. But we're family. Doesn't that mean anything? My heart ached at his words, but I held firm. It means everything, I said, which is why your willingness to question my independence cuts so deeply. I reached for a folder on the coffee table, pulling out a stack of documents with deliberate calm. Tomorrow, I'm undergoing a comprehensive cognitive assessment with Dr. Emmett Chen, a leading geriatric specialist. I've also scheduled evaluations with 2 other independent experts for additional opinions. These will provide formal documentation of my mental clarity. Alexandra's expression tightened, recognizing the legal fortress I was building. Furthermore, I continued, I've executed a durable power of attorney, naming Eleanor Whitford as my agent should I ever become incapacitated. Eleanor, a retired judge with no financial stake in my estate, will act solely according to my wishes. Michael's face darkened. Who is Eleanor Whitford? Some stranger with no understanding of our family? I met his gaze, my voice calm but resolute. Eleanor is a dear friend and a retired judge with extensive estate experience. She respects my autonomy in ways I need you to understand. I slid the documents back into the folder, my eyes moving from one child to the next. Here's what happens next. There will be no further attempts to question my competence or meddle in my financial decisions. No discussions of guardianship, no consultations with elder law specialists about my case, no contact with my attorneys without my explicit permission. Alexandra's eyes narrowed, her lawyer's instinct flaring. And if we can't accept these boundaries? My voice softened, but its firmness was unshakable. Then the consequences will be significant. My estate plans can be amended at any time. Right now, despite my disappointment, I've kept provisions for each of you and your children. That could change if I'm forced to defend my dignity and autonomy against those who should be its fiercest protectors. The room grew heavy with the weight of my words. Rebecca's eyes glistened with tears. You disinherit us, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'd protect myself from anyone who tries to strip my independence through legal maneuvers. I corrected, my heart aching at her pain. I hope it never comes to that. Michael leaned forward, his voice strained. Mom, this feels like an overreaction. None of us has filed for guardianship or taken legal action. I nodded, my expression unwavering. Not yet, and now you know why you never will. I stood, signaling the end of the conversation, though my heart pounded with the weight of what I'd said. I love you all deeply, that hasn't changed, but our dynamic must. I am not just your mother, grandmother, or a widow. I am a woman with her own identity, resources, and right to self-determination. I need you to see me, not the role I have played, but who I am now. They left soon after, subdued, their faces a mix of shock and reflection. Whether they truly grasped the core issue, respect for my personhood beyond my maternal role, remained unclear. But one thing was certain, they understood the consequences of crossing the boundaries I'd set. The next morning, I walked into Dr. Chen's office, my heart steady as I completed the cognitive assessment. The results were a quiet triumph, confirming what I already knew. My mind was as sharp as ever, my resolve unbreakable. 3 days after my evaluation, the neuropsychologist's formal report arrived, a detailed document that affirmed my cognitive abilities in no uncertain terms. It declared my memory, reasoning, judgment, and executive function not just intact, but exceptional, with no trace of impairment that could undermine my capacity to make decisions. The clarity of the report felt like a quiet triumph, a validation of the strength I'd always known I possessed, but had recently been forced to defend. I sent copies to Marianne Thornfield, my attorney, to bolster my legal file, and to my children, Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca, as a firm rebuttal to any doubts they might have harbored about my competence. The act of sharing it wasn't just practical, it carried the weight of reclaiming my narrative, of asserting that I was still the architect of my own life. Alexandra responded with a curt email, acknowledging receipt with a brevity that betrayed her discomfort. Michael called, his voice stumbling through an awkward attempt to clarify that he'd never doubted my intelligence, though his words felt more like an apology for assumptions he couldn't quite articulate. Rebecca, always the most emotional, appeared at my apartment unannounced, clutching a bouquet of lilies, her eyes brimming with tears as she apologized for any misunderstanding. Her remorse was genuine, but it was clear she was grappling with guilt over the rift that had grown between us. None of them uttered the words guardianship, competency, or financial oversight, as if those concepts had been banished from our shared vocabulary. Their silence spoke volumes, a tacit acknowledgement that the balance of our relationship had shifted. In the week that followed, I threw myself into the next chapter of my life with renewed vigor. The renovation of my Victorian townhouse surged forward, the master suite taking shape with its soaring ceilings and intricate moldings, the kitchen blending timeless elegance with modern efficiency, and the main living areas coming alive with warmth and character. I immersed myself in selecting furnishings, commissioning custom pieces that reflected both my taste and my needs, and collaborating with a landscape architect to restore the garden to its Victorian-era splendor. Each decision was a deliberate act of creation, a way of weaving my past with Gerald into a future that was distinctly mine. Yet, beneath my focus, I sensed my children's cautious distance. Their communications grew more respectful, less presumptuous, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty, as if they were still reconciling themselves to the reality that their mother was not only capable, but commanding resources, both financial and personal, they hadn't fully grasped. The confrontation, though painful, had been a necessary reckoning, stripping away pretense and setting clear boundaries. Whether those boundaries would nurture a healthier bond or merely maintain a wary truce remained uncertain. But what was undeniable was the authority I'd reclaimed over my life. In that act, I hoped I'd given my children a lesson in respect, dignity, and the courage to stand unapologetically in one's truth. On a crisp autumn morning, 4 months after purchasing the Victorian townhouse, I stood in the heart of the restored front parlor, bathed in the soft glow of morning light filtering through the newly refurbished stained glass transom. Jewel-toned patterns danced across the polished hardwood floor, a testament to the care poured into reviving this once-neglected historic property. The renovation, completed 3 weeks earlier, had transformed the house into a sanctuary that honored its architectural heritage while embracing the comforts and accessibility I needed for my later years. Every detail, from the historically accurate paint colors to the discreetly installed elevator, reflected my vision for a home that would support my independence and joy. As I ran my fingers along the smooth mahogany banister, I felt a quiet pride, not just in the house, but in the life I was building within its walls. Today was the housewarming, a celebration orchestrated by Eleanor and the Liberation Ladies, as they called themselves, who had insisted on handling every detail. "You've managed enough projects," Josephine had said with a playful firmness when I tried to discuss catering options. "Let us take care of this." As I wandered through the rooms, tweaking flower arrangements and smoothing already pristine cushions, I marveled at how seamlessly the house had become home. The formal dining room, with its restored coffered ceiling and sparkling crystal chandelier, now housed Gerald's cherished book collection on built-in shelves, their leather spines a quiet nod to our shared history. The kitchen, a harmonious blend of Victorian charm and cutting-edge appliances, featured a generous island that invited casual conversation, its marble surface gleaming under the soft light. The third floor, once a nursery and children's playroom, had been reimagined as a bright studio where I'd begun to explore painting, a passion I'd set aside decades ago. The carriage house apartment, thoughtfully designed for future caregiving needs, served for now as a cozy guest suite for visiting friends. Every choice, from the widened doorways to the flush thresholds and abundant lighting, was made with intention, ensuring this home would support me through any future limitations while celebrating my current vitality. As I adjusted a pillow on the window seat overlooking the harbor, the doorbell chimed, announcing Eleanor's arrival. She swept in, radiant in a teal dress that complemented her silver hair, bearing a bottle of champagne and an orchid in a copper pot. "It's perfect, Olivia," she said after I guided her through the completed spaces, her voice warm with admiration. "You've struck the ideal balance of grandeur and comfort. This is truly special." I accepted her praise with a smile, no longer deflecting compliments as I might have in the past. A small but meaningful shift in how I carried myself. The Liberation ladies arrived soon after, each drawn to different facets of the restoration. Josephine marveled at the kitchen's clever integration of modern conveniences, discreetly tucked behind Victorian paneling. Margot made a beeline for the baby grand piano in the front parlor, her fingers tracing the keys with a reverence that hinted at her past as a concert pianist. Deborah declared the master bathroom positively decadent, fawning over its deep soaking tub and heated floors. Marianne Thornfield arrived with a framed vintage map of the Harbor District from the 1880s, a thoughtful gift for my new study. Leanne Porter, the real estate agent who had helped me find the property, brought a bottle of wine and tales of other historic homes in the neighborhood. Even Dr. Chen stopped by, charming the group with his gentle humor and genuine curiosity about the home's accessibility features. By mid-afternoon, the house hummed with laughter and conversation as caterers wove through the crowd with trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Watching my eclectic circle of friends, professional allies, new acquaintances, and lifelong companions mingle with such ease filled me with a profound sense of fulfillment. This gathering was more than a housewarming. It was a celebration of the life I was deliberately crafting, a testament to my resilience and vision. The doorbell chimed again, and I turned to see Alexandra, Michael, and Rebecca standing in the entryway, each holding a housewarming gift, their expressions a blend of curiosity and cautious hope. I had invited them, though their attendance had felt uncertain until this moment. "Welcome, Asal," I said, my voice warm as I embraced each in turn. "I'm so glad you could come." "We wouldn't miss it," Rebecca replied, though the slight quiver in her voice suggested the decision had been fraught with hesitation. "The house is stunning, Mom, truly." I gave them a brief tour, watching their reactions as they absorbed the scope of the renovation. Alexandra's eyes lingered on the architectural details, her appreciation tinged with reluctance, as if she were recalibrating her understanding of me. Michael, ever the pragmatist, assessed the craftsmanship with a professional eye, nodding in approval at the precision of the joinery. Rebecca's delight was unreserved, particularly in the third-floor studio, where she paused at the easel positioned to capture the northern light. "I had no idea you were interested in painting," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "There are many things about me you've never asked about," I replied gently, my tone free of reproach but firm in its truth. "But it's never too late to learn." As the afternoon unfolded, my worlds converged with surprising harmony. I caught Alexandra in animated conversation with Marianne about landmark preservation laws, her guarded demeanor softening as they found common ground. Michael bonded with my contractor over the challenges of sourcing authentic period materials, their discussion lively and technical. Rebecca joined Margot at the piano, carefully turning pages as the older woman played a Chopin nocturne, its elegant melancholy filling the house with a quiet reverence. As sunset cast a golden glow through the stained glass windows, Eleanor gathered everyone in the front parlor for a toast. Raising her champagne flute, she addressed the room with the commanding grace that had made her a formidable judge. "To Olivia," she began, her voice steady and warm, "who has shown us that our later years can be not just an epilogue, but the most authentic chapter of our lives. This home is a testament to her vision, her strength, and her unwavering commitment to living on her own terms. May it be a place of boy connection and inspiration for years to come." In the grand, meticulously restored house, its walls steeped in history yet vibrant with new life, the air buzzed with the warmth of celebration. The gathering wasn't merely about showcasing the architectural revival of a historic gem. It was a profound declaration of reclaiming one's essence after years of prioritizing others. The room hummed with murmurs of agreement, a soft chorus of understanding that rippled through the guests. I caught Alexandra shifting in her seat, her usual poise tinged with unease, as if the weight of the moment pressed against her carefully constructed facade. Michael, ever the pragmatic one, seemed to find sudden fascination in the scuff marks on his shoes, avoiding the intensity of the atmosphere. Rebecca, meanwhile, blinked rapidly, her eyes shimmering with emotions she wasn't ready to name, each flutter a quiet battle to hold back tears. Eleanor, with the gravitas earned from decades on the judicial bench, continued her toast, her voice steady yet rich with empathy. In all my years adjudicating family disputes, she said, I've seen the heart of conflict rarely lies in money or property. It's about recognition, the primal need to be seen, truly seen, as an individual with dreams and desires, not just a role to play or a resource to exploit. Her words landed like stones in a still pond, sending ripples through my own heart. She spoke of me, Olivia, with a reverence that made my chest tighten. Olivia has walked a delicate path with extraordinary grace, Eleanor continued, her glass raised high. She's drawn boundaries without cutting ties, claimed her independence without disowning her past. This house, this moment, is a testament to new beginnings forged from hard-earned wisdom. Her toast soared, a call to honor truth and liberation. To Olivia, she declared, and the room echoed her, glasses clinking in a symphony of raised hopes. As the evening unfolded and guests began to drift away, Alexandra approached me in a quiet corner. Her professional armor softened, her eyes betraying a rare vulnerability. Mom, she began, her voice lower, almost fragile. I owe you a real apology, not the perfunctory note I sent after everything. Her words hung heavy, laced with regret. I was wrong to contact Marianne's firm the way I did, to even consider guardianship options without speaking to you first. I studied her face, so like mine in its sharp angles and determined jaw, yet so guarded in its expressions, always calculating, always measuring. Her admission stirred a warmth in me, tempered by the caution of a mother who knows her child's complexities. Thank you, Alexandra, I said softly. Your honesty means more than you know. She hesitated, then pressed on, her voice steadier, but her eyes searching mine. Since our confrontation, I've been reflecting, really reflecting. I've spent my entire adult life viewing relationships like balance sheets, weighing inputs against outputs, risks against rewards. It's made me a sharp attorney, but she faltered, her gaze dropping briefly before returning to mine. It's left me poorer in ways I didn't see until now. Her confession hung between us, raw and unguarded, a crack in the polished veneer she wore so well. I nodded, careful not to rush this moment of openness. That's a profound realization, I said, my tone gentle but deliberate. It takes courage to see yourself so clearly. When you announced the house purchase, she continued, and we learned about the financial resources you'd kept private, my instincts kicked in. I started thinking like a lawyer, asset protection, estate planning, liability concerns, before I ever considered you as you. Her eyes locked with mine, unflinching now. I saw a client with mismanaged assets, not my mother building a life she'd earned. A faint smile touched her lips, tentative but genuine. Now I see a woman who knows exactly what she's doing. This house, these friends, the world you're creating, it's not just impressive, matamam, it's humbling. Her words wrapped around my heart, a gift I hadn't expected. Thank you, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. That means the world coming from you. She gave a small, self-conscious laugh. I can't promise I won't slip back into lawyer mode, but I'm trying to see the people in my life as people first, not cases to manage or problems to solve. Later, as the party wound down, I found Michael in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, helping the caterers pack leftovers into containers with a care that surprised me. Thoughtfulness had never been his hallmark. He was the son who built empires, not bridges. You know, he said, sealing a container of canapes with a precision that mirrored his work, I came here today expecting to spot flaws in the renovation. Shoddy workmanship, amateur shortcuts, the kind of things I always find when homeowners take on projects like this. I raised an eyebrow, inviting him to continue. And, I prompted. He shook his head, a reluctant grin tugging at his lips. I couldn't find a single one. Your team did exceptional work, better than some of my own projects, if I'm honest. His admission carried a weight of respect I hadn't heard from him in years. They were artisans, I agreed, pride swelling in my chest. I trusted their expertise, gave them the resources and freedom to do their best work. Michael paused, stacking containers with a meticulousness that felt almost meditative. That's not how I've been running my business lately, he admitted, his voice low, almost confessional. I've been chasing volume, bigger contracts, flashier clients, higher margins. I've pushed my crews to cut corners where clients wouldn't notice, to work faster, cheaper. His words carried a quiet shame, a man confronting a version of himself he no longer recognized. That doesn't sound like the builder you once dreamed of being, I said gently, careful not to judge. He nodded, his expression heavy. It's not. Somewhere along the way, I got caught up in the race for more projects, more status, a certain lifestyle. I lost sight of the craftsmanship that made me love this work. I placed a hand on his arm, a small gesture to anchor him. It's never too late to realign your compass, Michael. He sighed, doubt clouding his eyes. Maybe, but Lisa's talking about vacation homes in the Bahamas. The kids need college funds in the life we've built. It's got a lot of overhead. His voice wavered, caught between ambition and regret. Those are choices, I reminded him softly. Just as your father and I made choices, sometimes prioritizing experiences over possessions, relationships over status. Your father believed in quiet, steady growth, building wealth slowly, without flash or fanfare. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Michael nodded, thoughtful. I could stand to borrow some of that philosophy, he said. Maybe focus on fewer projects, but ones I can be proud of. As the last guest trickled out, I found Rebecca in the third-floor studio, standing by the window, the harbor lights twinkling like stars against the dusk. Her eyes were glassy, brimming with tears she hadn't yet let fall. This room, she said softly, her voice trembling. It's so, you, Mom. I didn't even know you wanted to paint. Her words pierced me, a reminder of how much I'd tucked away during the years of raising her and her siblings. There were dreams I set aside, I told her, my voice steady but warm. Not out of resentment, but because life's seasons shift our priorities. Now, I'm in a new season, one where I can explore those dreams again. Rebecca brushed at her eyes, her fingers trembling. I think I've been stuck in one season, running so fast I never stopped to ask if it was the right direction. The kids' schedules, Daniel's career, my sales targets, it's all been about forward motion, never about this. She gestured toward the easel, the neatly arranged art supplies, a space carved out for creation and reflection. You've made room for yourself, for joy. I can't remember the last time I did that. Her vulnerability stirred a deep ache in me, a mother's longing to ease her child's burdens. It's never too late to start, I said, echoing the words I'd shared with Michael. You can choose to make space for what matters. The twins asked about art classes this summer, she said, her voice thoughtful. I brushed it off, told them it wasn't practical, that it wouldn't help their college applications. But seeing this space, hearing how you're rediscovering your passions, maybe I've been too focused on their achievements instead of their happiness. I nodded, understanding the weight of that realization. Balance is hard, I said. Your father and I wanted you all to have opportunities we didn't, to be set up for success, but maybe in pushing for progress, we taught you to always chase the next goal instead of savoring the moment. Rebecca's smile was fragile but real. You're making up for it now, Mom. This house, this life, it's all about living in the present, isn't it? I smiled, correcting her gently. Present wishing, informed by past wisdom and future considerations. It's about balance, not abandoning responsibility, but weaving it with fulfillment. After my children left, Alexandra with a reserved but warm hug, Michael with awkward but heartfelt praise for the house, Rebecca with tearful promises to return soon. I stood on the front porch watching their cars vanish down the tree-lined street. Eleanor joined me, her shawl draped against the evening chill, her presence a steady comfort. Successful summit? She asked, her tone light, but her eyes knowing, aware of how much this gathering meant after the tensions of recent months. Promising, I replied, a cautious optimism in my voice. Not a complete transformation, but a shift, a beginning. She nodded, her gaze drifting to the stars emerging in the deepening sky. Families are like old houses, always under renovation. The question is whether the effort flows both ways. I smiled at her metaphor, so fitting for the night. Time will tell, I said. For now, I'm content with setting boundaries and hearing them acknowledge my autonomy. You've done something extraordinary, Olivia, Eleanor said, her voice soft but certain. Not just with this house, but with the third act of your life. You've refused to fade, to shrink into someone else's expectations. I thought of her and the other women who'd inspired me, their own bold choices lighting my path. I had excellent examples, I said, gratitude warming my words, and a wake-up call that shook me to my core. We stood in quiet companionship, the night wrapping around us, the stars a silent promise of new chapters yet to unfold. In the quiet aftermath of the housewarming, I wandered through my new home, savoring its stillness. The echoes of laughter and clinking glasses had faded, leaving only the soft hum of solitude. Each room I passed through seemed to pulse with potential, whispering of moments yet to come. I imagined cozy mornings curled up with a steaming mug of coffee and a novel, afternoons lost in the studio where sunlight would spill across my canvas, and evenings spent gazing at the harbor's twinkling lights. This house was more than bricks and mortar. It was a bold statement, a testament to my right to claim space, beauty, and peace in the autumn of my life. After decades of nurturing others, I had carved out a sanctuary that reflected not just my needs, but my deepest desires. In my bedroom, a tranquil haven with windows framing both the garden's quiet bloom and the harbor's restless shimmer, I paused before the carved wooden box that held Gerald's most cherished belongings. My fingers brushed its intricate surface, a tactile reminder of the life we'd shared. Inside lay the letter he'd penned in his final weeks, meant for me to read when I was ready to face his absence. I'd opened it once, just after his funeral, but the raw ache of grief had blurred his words. Back then, I could barely breathe through the loss, let alone absorb his message. Now, standing in this new chapter, surrounded by the tangible proof of my resilience, I felt a quiet strength settle within me. Tonight was the night to revisit his voice, to let his words guide me forward. I lifted the letter from the box, its cream-colored stationery catching the lamplight. Gerald's handwriting, though faintly shaky, was unmistakably his. Each loop and slant a piece of the man who'd been my partner for 45 years. My heart tightened as I began to read. My dearest Olivia, if you are holding this, I've set out on the journey we all must take alone, leaving you to walk yours without me by your side. But I hope you feel me still, cheering you on, delighting in every step you take. His words wrapped around me like an embrace, warm and steady. He spoke of our shared life, the joy of raising our children, the dreams we'd chased together, the storms we'd weathered hand in hand. You've been my anchor, my laughter, my home, he wrote, and my eyes blurred with tears, not of sorrow, but of gratitude for the love we'd built. Yet it was his next words that struck deepest, a plea that seemed to anticipate the weight I'd carry after his passing. My greatest wish is that you now live for yourself. You've given so much to me, to our children, to everyone who's known you, that I fear you've forgotten how to put your own happiness first. Gerald had always seen me, even when I couldn't see myself. He knew how I'd poured my heart into others, often at the cost of my own dreams. He reminded me of the financial security we'd planned together, the trust fund meant to ensure I'd never want for anything. It's for you to live as you choose, he urged, to travel if it sparks joy, to create a home that's yours alone, to chase the passions you've set aside. His fear wasn't death, he confessed, but the thought that I might shrink myself to honor a legacy that no longer served me. Our children are grown, with lives and resources of their own. What they need isn't more sacrifice, but the example of a woman who embraces her years with courage and joy. I paused, my fingertip tracing his signature, remembering a conversation we'd had in Riverside Park just after his diagnosis. Sitting on a weathered bench, the autumn leaves swirling around us, I'd asked what he'd do if I were the one leaving first. His answer had been unwavering. I'd live well, find new purpose, maybe even new love, to honor you. And now in his letter, he echoed that vow, granting me permission to redefine my life. Say no to what drains you, he wrote. Explore paths we never walked together. Become the Olivia who exists beyond wife and beyond mother, beyond the roles that have shaped but never confined you. His love poured through every word, not as a tether to the past, but as a blessing for my future. The greatest gift you can give me is to become your fullest self. Tears fell freely, but they carried no sting. Instead, they felt like a release, a cleansing of the lingering guilt I'd held for daring to want more than the roles I'd played. Gerald had foreseen my struggle, had gifted me not just financial freedom, but the emotional courage to reshape my life. The trust fund, the one my children had never known about, had been at the heart of our recent rift. They'd assumed it was theirs by right, an inheritance to be claimed without question. But Gerald's intent had been clear. It was first for me to ensure my independence and dignity, with the secondary purpose of one day benefiting our grandchildren. When I redirected those resources to establish the Richardson-Larson Charitable Foundation, I hadn't defied his wishes. I'd fulfilled them. The foundation would support elderly individuals facing their final years alone, without family or means, while allowing me to set boundaries with children who'd revealed they saw me as little more than a conduit for wealth. I folded the letter with care, returning it to the box, and moved to the window. The harbor stretched before me, its dark waters kissed by moonlight, a silver path shimmering across its surface. That same moon had watched every chapter of my life, my youth as a hopeful bride, my years as a devoted mother, my decades as Gerald's partner, and now my emergence as a woman claiming her own story. The confrontation with my children had been agonizing, their accusations cutting deep. They'd called me a burden, their entitlement laid bare. Yet that pain had been necessary, a crucible that burned away pretense and forced us to face each other honestly. Their presence at the housewarming hinted at a fragile hope for reconciliation, a chance to build relationships rooted in respect rather than obligation. Whether that hope would bloom was uncertain, but I'd created the space for it to grow. More than that, I reclaimed my narrative. The trust fund, the inheritance that my children had banked on without ever acknowledging, was no longer theirs. Not out of spite, but from a deeper truth. Legacy is more than money. It's the values we live, the wisdom we share, the courage to stand in our truth. By redirecting those resources to the foundation, I'd honored Gerald's vision and my own, choosing a path that served a greater good while protecting my autonomy. As I slipped into bed, the linens cool against my skin, I felt Gerald's presence, not as a specter, but as a quiet partner, his love transcending the boundaries of life and death. He'd laid the foundation for this new act of my life, and I'd built upon it something uniquely mine. Tomorrow promised fresh beginnings, a meeting with the foundation's board to review grant applications, lunch with Josephine to plan an art retreat, perhaps the first strokes of a seascape for the living room. The future unfurled before me, not a narrowing road, but a vast horizon brimming with possibility. Challenges would come, health, family, the inevitability of aging, but I'd face them with the certainty that I was enough. The pain of my children's words, the loss of Gerald, the weight of starting over had forged something unyielding within me. Canceling the trust fund they'd never known about had been a painful but liberating act. In its place, I'd found something far more precious: the freedom to live as my truest self, unapologetically and fully, for whatever years remained.